The beginning of all things. In the beginning, there was only chaos, a vast and yawning void of nothingness that stretched endlessly in all directions. This primordial emptiness was neither dark nor light, neither hot nor cold, but simply an absence of all things, a formless expanse where nothing existed and nothing happened. From this infinite emptiness, the first beings emerged, not through any conscious act of creation, but through a mysterious process that even the gods themselves could never fully explain. First came Gaia, the earth herself, solid and nurturing, providing a foundation upon which all other things could exist. She emerged complete and whole, stretching her body across the void to create the first stable ground, the first place where things could be and remain. Her surface was initially barren and empty, but she contained within herself the potential for all life that would eventually flourish upon her. Next appeared Tartarus, the deep abyss that lay far beneath the earth, a place of darkness and imprisonment that would later serve as the dungeon for the most dangerous beings in all creation. This realm existed as far below the earth as the sky would eventually rise above it, a mirror image of the heights in the depths, equally vast and equally mysterious. Then came Eros, the force of love and attraction, though not yet the playful winged god that later stories would describe. This primordial Eros was the power that draws things together, the force that would allow the other primordial beings to interact and create new generations of gods and creatures. Without Eros, all things would have remained forever separate and alone. From chaos also emerged Erebus, the deep darkness that fills the spaces between things, and Nyx, the night herself, who would drape her dark veil across the sky each evening. These two beings of darkness found each other in the void, and through their union they brought forth their opposites, Ether, the bright upper air where the gods would dwell, and Hemera, the day, who would chase her mother night across the sky in an eternal cycle. The children of Earth. Gaia, finding herself alone despite these other primordial beings, brought forth from herself, without any partner, her son Uranus, the sky, who emerged to cover her completely with his star-spangled form. She created him to be her equal in size and grandeur, stretching exactly as far as she did in every direction, so that he could serve as a perfect partner. She also gave birth to the mountains, the Aurea, who stood tall and proud upon her surface, and Pontus, the sea, whose waters filled the low places of her body. With Uranus now existing as her consort, Gaia began to bear children who would become the first generation of true gods. These were the 12 Titans, 6 sons and 6 daughters, beings of enormous power and size, who would rule the cosmos before the Olympian gods were even dreamed of. The male Titans were Oceanus, who would encircle the entire world with his river body, Hyperion, who would father the lights of heaven, Coeus, the questioning one who embodied curiosity and intelligence, Creus, mighty and strong, Iapetus, who would father some of the most important figures in human history, and Cronus, the youngest and craftiest, who would overthrow his father and rule in his place. The female Titans, the Titanesses, were equally magnificent. Theia shone with an inner light that would pass to her children, the sun, moon, and dawn. Rhea would become the mother of the next generation of gods, enduring great sorrow but ultimately seeing her children triumph. Themis embodied divine law and custom, establishing the proper ways for gods and mortals to behave. Mnemosyne was memory itself, preserving all knowledge and experience. Phoebe possessed the gift of prophecy, seeing patterns in the bright light of intellect. And Tethys, partnered with Oceanus, would mother the rivers and springs that would nurture all life. But the Titans were not the only children of this primordial union. Gaia and Uranus also produced the 3 Cyclopes, giants with single, round eyes in the center of their foreheads. These were Brontes, whose name means thunder, Steropes, who was lightning, and Arges, the bright thunderbolt. Despite their fearsome appearance, these Cyclopes were master craftsmen, possessed of skills that would later prove invaluable to the gods. They would forge the weapons that would determine the fate of the cosmos, including Zeus's thunderbolts, Poseidon's trident, and Hades' helm of invisibility. The third group of children born to Gaia and Uranus were the Hecatonchires, the hundred-handed ones, perhaps the strangest beings ever to exist. Cottus, Briareus, and Gyges each possessed 50 heads and 100 arms, making them terrible to behold, but incredibly powerful in battle. Their strength was beyond measure, and each could throw hundreds of massive boulders simultaneously, creating a storm of stone that no enemy could withstand. The first divine conflict. Uranus, however, was a cruel and jealous father. He looked upon his children, particularly the Cyclopes and the Hecatonchires, with disgust and fear. Their power threatened him, and their strange appearances offended his sense of divine perfection. Unable to bear the sight of them and terrified of what they might become, he imprisoned them deep within Gaia's body, pushing them back into her womb and refusing to allow them to emerge into the light. This caused Gaia tremendous pain, as these giant children remained trapped within her, unable to be born properly, unable to fulfill their destinies. The Titans he allowed to remain free, perhaps seeing them as more acceptable children, more like himself in their appearance and manner. But Gaia's rage grew with each passing day that her other children remained imprisoned. She began to plot against Uranus, crafting within her own body a great sickle made of adamantine, a divine metal harder than any substance that had existed before. She gathered her Titan children and pleaded with them to help her against their father, explaining the injustice he had done to their siblings and the pain he continued to cause her. Most of the Titans were too fearful to act against their powerful father, who controlled the entire sky and could see all that happened beneath him. But Cronus, the youngest and most ambitious, agreed to help his mother. He had his own reasons for wanting power, seeing an opportunity not just to free his imprisoned siblings, but to take his father's place as ruler of all things. Gaia gave him the adamantine sickle and told him her plan. That night, when Uranus descended from his heights to lie with Gaia, as was his custom, Cronus lay in ambush. At the moment when Uranus was most vulnerable, Cronus leaped from his hiding place and used the sickle to castrate his father, severing his generative powers and throwing the severed parts into the sea. The blood that fell upon Gaia gave birth to the Erinyes, the Furies, who would forever punish those who shed family blood, the giants, enormous warriors who would one day challenge the gods themselves, and the Meliae, nymphs of the ash trees from which the first spears would be made. From the foam that formed where Uranus's severed parts fell into the sea, a figure of incredible beauty emerged. This was Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, born fully grown from the mixture of sea foam and divine essence. She stepped onto the island of Cyprus and flowers bloomed beneath her feet, while Eros, now transformed into her constant companion, and Himeros, desire, attended her from her very first moments. The Age of Cronus. With Uranus defeated and weakened, no longer able to press down upon the earth with his full weight, Cronus took control of the cosmos. But power changed him quickly, and he proved to be no better than his father. Despite his mother's pleas, he refused to free the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires from their imprisonment, fearing their power just as his father had. This betrayal angered Gaia deeply, and she began to see that she had merely exchanged one tyrant for another. Cronus took his sister Rhea as his wife, establishing the pattern of divine marriages between siblings that would continue among the gods. But he had learned of a prophecy, perhaps from his mother Gaia herself, perhaps from the primordial powers of fate, that he would be overthrown by one of his own children, just as he had overthrown his father. This knowledge poisoned his reign from the very beginning, filling him with paranoia and fear. When Rhea gave birth to their first child, Hestia, Cronus demanded to see the baby. The moment Rhea placed the infant in his arms, he opened his great mouth and swallowed her whole. Rhea was horrified, but Cronus was too powerful to resist. The same fate befell their next children. Demeter was swallowed second, then Hera, then Hades, and then Poseidon. Each time, Cronus consumed the infant immediately after birth, keeping them trapped within his belly where they could not grow to challenge him. The other Titans established their own domains during this time. Oceanus and Tethys lived at the edges of the world, where the great river Oceanus flowed in an endless circle around all lands. They had thousands of children, the Oceanids, nymphs who inhabited every stream, river, and body of water in existence. Their sons became the gods of all the world's rivers, from the mighty Nile to the smallest mountain brook. Hyperion and Theia produced 3 children who would bring light to the cosmos. Helios, the sun, drove his chariot of fire across the sky each day, pulled by 4 horses whose names meant blaze, dawn, bright, and flame. His sister Selene, the moon, followed a similar path at night with her silver chariot, her pale light a gentle reflection of her brother's brilliance. Their sister Eos, the dawn, went before Helios each morning, her rosy fingers opening the gates of heaven for her brother's journey. Coeus and Phoebe had 2 daughters of particular importance. Leto would become the mother of Apollo and Artemis, though her story involved great suffering and wandering. Asteria would transform herself into the island of Delos to escape unwanted attention, becoming the only stable point in the sea where Leto could give birth. Iapetus married Clymene, one of the Oceanids, and their children would play crucial roles in the relationship between gods and mortals. Atlas would be condemned to hold up the sky for eternity. Menoetius would fight against the Olympians and be struck down. Epimetheus would accept Pandora as his wife, bringing suffering to humanity. And Prometheus, the most clever of all, would steal fire for humanity and suffer eternal punishment for his transgression. The Hidden Child. When Rhea became pregnant for the 6th time, she was determined not to lose another child to Cronus's terrible hunger. She went to her mother Gaia and father Uranus, who despite his weakened state still possessed prophetic knowledge, and begged for their help. They told her to go to the island of Crete when her time came to give birth, where there was a sacred cave on Mount Ida that Cronus could not see into. Following their advice, Rhea travelled secretly to Crete, and there gave birth to Zeus in the hidden cave. The cave was attended by minor deities who would help protect the infant. The Curetes, young warrior spirits, danced and clashed their spears against their shields outside the cave, creating such a noise that any sound the baby might make would be completely drowned out. A goat named Amalthea nursed the divine infant with her rich milk, while bees brought him honey and an eagle brought him ambrosia from places unknown. Meanwhile, Rhea returned to Cronus with a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. The Titan Lord, suspicious but not wanting to appear weak or fearful, demanded the supposed infant immediately. Rhea handed over the bundle, and Cronus, without even unwrapping it to look, swallowed the stone whole. Satisfied that he had prevented the prophecy once again, he returned to his rule, unaware that his eventual downfall was growing stronger every day in the Cretan cave. Zeus grew with supernatural speed, nurtured not just by food, but by the knowledge that he had a destiny to fulfill. The nymphs who raised him told him stories of his siblings trapped in their father's belly, of his grandparents' suffering, of the injustices that plagued the cosmos under Cronus's rule. Some say he was raised by the nymph Adamanthea, who hung his cradle from a tree so that he was suspended between earth, sea, and sky, making him impossible for Cronus to find since he belonged to no single realm. Others say the nymph Cynosura was his primary nurse, and that he placed her among the stars as the constellation Ursa Minor in gratitude for her care. As Zeus grew, he began to display extraordinary powers. Lightning flickered between his fingers when he was excited or angry. His voice, even as a child, could shake the mountain. Animals came to him willingly, recognizing his divine nature. The very earth seemed to respond to his emotions, growing verdant when he was happy, withering when he was sad. It became clear to all who knew him that this was no ordinary god, but one destined for greatness beyond measure. The Rise of Zeus. When Zeus reached maturity, he knew the time had come to challenge his father and free his siblings, but he could not do this through strength alone, as Cronus was still tremendously powerful and had most of the Titans as allies. Instead, Zeus would need to use cunning and carefully gathered allies to achieve his goals. His first ally was Metis, an Oceanid renowned for her wisdom and craft. She would later become Zeus's first wife, though their story would end tragically with Zeus swallowing her while she was pregnant to prevent a prophecy about their child overthrowing him. Metis concocted a special potion that would cause Cronus to regurgitate everything he had swallowed. Some say it was a mixture of mustard and wine, others say it contained herbs known only to the gods. Zeus disguised himself as Cronus's cupbearer, a position of trust that allowed him close access to the Titan Lord. During a great feast, Zeus served his father the doctored drink. The effect was immediate and violent. Cronus began to vomit uncontrollably, and first came the stone he had swallowed, thinking it was Zeus. This stone would later be placed at Delphi, where it would become a sacred object marking the center of the world. Then, in reverse order from how they had been swallowed, came Zeus's siblings, fully grown and ready for vengeance. First came Poseidon, then Hades, then Hera, then Demeter, and finally Hestia. Though they had been trapped in their father's stomach, they had continued to grow and develop, and they emerged as full-fledged gods, angry and eager to claim their rightful places in the cosmos. The siblings immediately rallied around Zeus as their leader and liberator. Together, they declared war on Cronus and the Titans who supported him. This conflict, known as the Titanomachy, would rage for 10 full years, shaking the very foundations of existence. The battle lines were drawn, with Zeus and his siblings establishing their base on Mount Olympus, while Cronus and the Titans who remained loyal to him operated from Mount Othrys. The Great War. The Titanomachy was unlike any conflict that had come before or would come after. Mountains were thrown like pebbles, seas boiled from the heat of divine fire, and the sky itself cracked from the force of the combatants' blows. The earth groaned under the strain of supporting such a battle, and mortal life, what little existed at this time, cowered in caves and hidden places, waiting for the chaos to end. Not all the Titans sided with Cronus. Oceanus, perhaps seeing the futility of the fight, remained neutral, continuing his eternal flow around the world's edges. Prometheus and Epimetheus, sons of Iapetus, sided with Zeus. Prometheus because his gift of foresight showed him that Zeus would triumph, Epimetheus because he followed his brother's lead. Themis, goddess of divine law, also joined Zeus, recognizing that the natural order required this change of power. These defections were crucial as they provided Zeus not just with additional fighters, but with legitimacy, showing that his cause was just. For years, the battle raged without either side gaining a decisive advantage. The Titans were older and more experienced, their powers deeply rooted in the fundamental forces of the cosmos. But the younger gods were more dynamic, more adaptable, and they fought with the fury of those who had been wronged. Zeus hurled lightning bolts forged from storm clouds. Poseidon caused earthquakes that shattered the Titans' formations, and Hades used his power over darkness and fear to demoralize their enemies. The tide of war turned when Zeus made a crucial decision. Remembering that the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires still remained imprisoned in Tartarus where Cronus had left them, Zeus descended into the depths of the earth with his siblings to free them. The journey to Tartarus was perilous, requiring them to pass through regions of the underworld that had never known light, where ancient monsters dwelt and the very air was poison to those who did not belong. But they persevered, and when they reached the prison of these ancient beings, they shattered their chains. The Cyclopes, grateful for their freedom after eons of imprisonment, immediately set to work creating weapons for their liberators. For Zeus, they forged the Thunderbolt, a weapon of such power that nothing could stand against it. For Poseidon, they created the Trident, which could shake the earth and command the seas. For Hades, they crafted a helm of invisibility, allowing him to move unseen among his enemies. These three weapons would become the symbols of the god's power for all time. The Hecatonchires proved equally valuable. Their 100 hands could throw a continuous barrage of massive boulders, creating an impenetrable wall of stone that no Titan could break through. In the final battle of the war, they threw 300 rocks at once, each as large as a mountain, overwhelming the Titan forces with sheer, devastating volume. Victory and the New Order. The final battle of the Titanomachy was a spectacle that shook the cosmos to its core. Zeus ascended to the heights of the sky, gathering storm clouds around him until he blazed with lightning. His thunderbolts fell like rain, each one powerful enough to shatter mountains. Poseidon caused the seas to rise and crash against Mount Othrys, undermining its foundations. Hades led an assault from below, causing the earth to open and swallow Titan warriors. The Hecatonchires maintained their barrage of stones, while the Cyclopes continued to forge weapons and repair armor even in the midst of battle. Cronus fought with desperate fury, knowing that defeat meant not death but something perhaps worse, eternal imprisonment. He wielded his adamantine sickle, the same weapon he had used against his own father, but even this could not prevail against the combined might of the younger gods and their allies. One by one, the Titans fell or fled. Hyperion was bound with chains of starlight. Creus was buried beneath a mountain. Coeus was driven mad by Zeus's lightning and fled into the wilderness. When the battle ended, Zeus and his siblings stood victorious. The defeated Titans were bound with chains forged by the Cyclopes, chains so strong that no force in the universe could break them. Zeus condemned them to Tartarus, the same prison where the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires had suffered for so long. The Hecatonchires, in a fitting reversal, became the jailers of their former captors, ensuring that the Titans could never escape to threaten the new order. Not all Titans received this harsh punishment. Those who had remained neutral or sided with Zeus were honored. Atlas, despite fighting against the Olympians, received a special punishment that was also a crucial responsibility. He was condemned to hold up the sky for eternity, preventing it from crashing down upon the earth. This task required incredible strength and endurance, making Atlas both a prisoner and a pillar of the cosmic order. Prometheus, though he had sided with Zeus, would later suffer his own punishment for defying the king of the gods, but that story belongs to a later time. With the Titans defeated, Zeus and his siblings divided the cosmos among themselves. They cast lots to determine who would rule which domain, though some say Zeus manipulated the outcome with his superior cunning. Zeus received the sky and became king of the gods, ruler of the heavens and the supreme authority among immortals. Poseidon received the seas, becoming lord of all waters, from the smallest stream to the vast oceans. Hades received the underworld, becoming master of the dead and all the wealth hidden beneath the earth. The earth itself and Mount Olympus were declared common ground, though Zeus's authority as king gave him the greatest say in matters affecting these regions. The Olympian Order. The three sisters also received their domains and honours. Hestia, the eldest, became goddess of the hearth, the sacred fire that burned in every home and temple. She would remain a virgin goddess, devoted to maintaining the flame that represented family, community, and continuity. Her position was so honoured that she received the first portion of every sacrifice, even before Zeus himself. Demeter became goddess of agriculture and the harvest, controlling the fertility of the earth and the growth of all plants that nourished mortal life. Hera, despite the complicated relationship she would have with Zeus, became queen of the gods when she married her brother, ruling over marriage and family life. Zeus established his court on Mount Olympus, the highest mountain in Greece, whose peak was said to pierce the heavens themselves. Here, he built palaces of cloud and starlight, halls where the gods could feast on ambrosia and nectar, the food and drink that maintained their immortality and power. The Horae, goddesses of the seasons, guarded the cloudy gates of Olympus, opening them only for those Zeus permitted to enter. The second generation of gods. The establishment of Olympian rule did not mean the end of divine births and the expansion of the pantheon. Zeus, in particular, would father numerous children who would become major deities in their own right, each adding their unique powers and domains to the cosmic order. His first wife was Metis, the Oceanid who had helped him defeat Cronus, but their union would be brief and tragic. When Metis became pregnant, Zeus learned of a prophecy that stated Metis would bear two children, first a daughter equal to Zeus in wisdom and strength, then a son who would overthrow his father, just as Zeus had overthrown Cronus, and Cronus had overthrown Uranus. Fearing this prophecy but also loving Metis, Zeus struggled with what to do. Finally, following the pattern of his father and grandfather before him, he decided to swallow Metis whole while she was still pregnant. But unlike Cronus's crude consumption of his children, Zeus absorbed Metis completely, taking her wisdom and counsel into himself permanently. This act would have an unexpected consequence that would manifest in one of the most dramatic births in all mythology. After swallowing Metis, Zeus married Themis, the titaness of divine law and order. With her, he fathered the Moirai, the three fates who would control the destiny of all beings, mortal and immortal alike. Clotho spun the thread of life, determining when each being would be born. Lachesis measured the thread, establishing how long each life would last and what fortune it would contain. Atropos cut the thread with her shears, bringing about inevitable death. Even Zeus himself could not override their decisions, making them perhaps the most powerful forces in the cosmos, despite being his own daughters. Themis also bore Zeus the Horae, the hours or seasons, who maintained the natural order of time and guarded the gates of Olympus. Eunomia represented good order and lawful conduct, Dike embodied justice and moral righteousness, and Irene personified peace and prosperity. These daughters ensured that both divine and mortal societies functioned according to proper laws and customs. Zeus then turned his attention to Eurynome, another Oceanid of extraordinary beauty who danced upon the waves. With her, he fathered the three Charites, known to mortals as the Graces. Aglaia represented splendor and glory, Euphrosyne embodied mirth and joy, and Thalia personified festivity and rich banquets. These goddesses attended other deities, particularly Aphrodite, and brought charm, beauty, and social grace to both divine and mortal gatherings. The birth of Apollo and Artemis. One of Zeus's most significant affairs was with Leto, daughter of the Titans Coeus and Phoebe. When Hera discovered that Leto was pregnant with Zeus's children, her jealousy knew no bounds. She forbade any land from giving Leto sanctuary to give birth, and she sent the dragon Python to pursue Leto wherever she went, ensuring she could find no rest. For months, Leto wandered the earth in agony, heavily pregnant and unable to deliver her children because no place would accept her, all fearing Hera's wrath. Finally, Leto came to the floating island of Delos, which was not technically land since it drifted upon the sea. Some say this island was actually Asteria, Leto's own sister, who had transformed herself into an island to escape Zeus's advances. Delos agreed to allow Leto to give birth there on the condition that the island would become sacred to her children and would be fixed in place, no longer wandering. Zeus caused 4 great pillars to rise from the ocean floor, anchoring Delos permanently. Even on Delos, Leto's labour was prolonged and difficult because Hera had detained Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, on Olympus. The other goddesses who had gathered to help Leto finally sent Iris, the rainbow messenger, to bring Eileithyia down secretly, bribing her with a golden necklace 9 cubits long. When Eileithyia arrived, Leto grasped a palm tree and brought forth first Artemis, who was born without pain after 9 days of labour. Artemis, though just born, immediately assisted her mother in delivering her twin brother Apollo, whose birth was accompanied by golden light that illuminated the entire island. The moment Apollo was born, sacred swans circled the island 7 times, and the island burst into bloom with golden flowers. Zeus showered the newborn god with divine gifts, including a golden mitre, a chariot drawn by swans, and a lyre. He fed Apollo ambrosia and nectar, and the infant god immediately burst from his swaddling clothes, declaring that he would be the god of music, archery, and prophecy, and that he would reveal the will of Zeus to mortals. Apollo's first act as a god was to hunt down Python, the dragon that had tormented his mother. Though only days old, Apollo was fully grown and powerful. He pursued Python to Delphi, where the monster guarded an ancient oracle of Gaia. With his golden arrows, Apollo slew Python and claimed the oracle for himself, establishing the most important prophetic shrine in the Greek world. To atone for killing Python, who was after all a child of Gaia, Apollo had to serve purification and establish the Pythian Games in the dragon's honour. Artemis chose a different path from her brother. While still a child in appearance, she approached her father Zeus and asked for several gifts: eternal virginity, a bow and arrows like her brothers but silver instead of gold, a pack of hounds for hunting, a band of nymphs as companions, and dominion over all wild places and creatures. Zeus, charmed by his daughter's determination, granted all her wishes and more. Artemis became the protector of young women and children, the goddess of the hunt and the wilderness, and the bringer of sudden death to women, just as Apollo brought sudden death to men. The birth of Athena. Months after swallowing Metis, Zeus began to suffer from terrible headaches that grew worse with each passing day. The pain became so unbearable that he roared in agony, his cries shaking Olympus to its foundations. He summoned Hephaestus, the smith god, though some say it was Prometheus or Hermes, and ordered him to split his skull open with an axe to relieve the pressure. With one mighty blow, Hephaestus cleaved Zeus's head, and from the wound sprang Athena, fully grown and dressed in golden armor, wielding a spear and shouting a war cry that resonated throughout the cosmos. The emergence of Athena was witnessed by all the gods, who stood in awe of this remarkable birth. The earth trembled, the sea rose in massive waves, and the sun stopped in its course. Athena immediately demonstrated both the wisdom inherited from her mother Metis and the power derived from her father Zeus. She became Zeus's favourite child, the only one he trusted with his thunderbolts and the Aegis, his mighty shield that bore the head of the Gorgon. Athena took no husband and remained a virgin goddess, devoted to wisdom, strategic warfare, and crafts. She became the patroness of heroes, guiding them with wise counsel rather than brute force. Unlike Ares, who delighted in the chaos and bloodshed of war, Athena represented the strategic and defensive aspects of combat, teaching mortals how to build cities and defend them with walls and disciplined armies. She also taught humanity many civilizing arts, including weaving, pottery, and shipbuilding. The relationship between Athena and Poseidon would become one of rivalry, most famously demonstrated in their competition for the patronage of Athens. Both gods appeared before the city's first king, Cecrops, to present their gifts. Poseidon struck the Acropolis with his trident, creating a salt spring that would give the city naval power. Athena planted an olive tree, providing food, oil, and wood. The citizens chose Athena's gift as more valuable, and the city took her name, though Poseidon's anger at this slight would cause tension for generations. The birth of Hephaestus. The birth of Hephaestus is told in different ways by different sources, each version revealing something about the complex relationships among the Olympian gods. In one version, Hera, jealous that Zeus had produced Athena without a mother's involvement, decided to bear a child without a father. Through her own divine will and perhaps with the help of certain magical herbs, she conceived and bore Hephaestus alone. However, when the child was born, he was imperfect, lame in one or both legs, and Hera, disgusted by what she saw as a failure, hurled him from Olympus. The infant god fell for an entire day, finally splashing into the sea near the island of Lemnos, where he was rescued and raised by the sea nymphs Thetis and Eurynome. For 9 years, he lived in an underwater grotto, learning the arts of metalworking and creating beautiful jewelry for his foster mothers. During this time, he crafted a magnificent golden throne as a gift for his mother, but the throne was actually a trap. When Hera sat upon it, invisible chains bound her fast, and no force in heaven or earth could free her. The gods pleaded with Hephaestus to release his mother, but he refused to return to Olympus, still bitter about his rejection. Finally, Dionysus, the god of wine, got Hephaestus drunk and brought him back to Olympus on a mule. In his intoxicated state, Hephaestus agreed to release Hera, and in return, he was given his rightful place among the Olympian gods and the hand of Aphrodite in marriage, though this union would prove to be unhappy due to Aphrodite's numerous affairs. In another version of his story, it was Zeus who threw Hephaestus from Olympus when the young god tried to protect his mother Hera during one of Zeus's rages. In this telling, Hephaestus fell to Lemnos and was cared for by the Sintians, the island's inhabitants, who taught him metalworking. Regardless of which version is true, Hephaestus became the divine blacksmith, creating all the magnificent palaces, weapons, and magical items used by the gods. The birth of Dionysus. The story of Dionysus's birth is perhaps the most unusual of all the Olympian gods, involving death, rebirth, and transformation. Zeus fell in love with Semele, a mortal princess of Thebes and daughter of Cadmus. Their affair continued in secret until Hera discovered it when Semele was already pregnant. Disguising herself as Semele's old nurse, Hera befriended the young woman and gradually convinced her that her mysterious lover might not really be Zeus at all, but some monster in disguise. Hera suggested that Semele should ask her lover to appear to her in his true divine form, as he appeared to his wife on Olympus as proof of his identity. She also reminded Semele that Zeus would have sworn an oath by the river Styx to grant her any wish, an oath that even the king of the gods could not break. The next time Zeus visited, Semele made him promise to grant her one request, and he eagerly swore the inviolable oath. When she asked him to show himself in his full divine glory, Zeus was horrified, knowing that no mortal could survive the sight of his true form. Bound by his oath, Zeus had no choice but to comply. He appeared before Semele with the smallest portion of his divine power he could manage, but even this was too much. The thunder and lightning that comprised his true form incinerated Semele instantly, leaving only ashes. But Zeus acted quickly to save his unborn child. He snatched the infant from Semele's womb and, cutting open his own thigh, sewed the baby inside to complete his gestation. When the time was right, Dionysus was born from Zeus's thigh, making him twice born and the only Olympian god with a mortal parent. To protect the infant from Hera's continuing wrath, Zeus gave Dionysus to Hermes, who carried him to be raised by the nymphs of Nysa, a mythical mountain valley. Some say he was raised as a girl to hide his identity from Hera. The nymphs fed him on honey and taught him the secrets of nature. As he grew, Dionysus discovered the cultivation of grapes and the making of wine, becoming the god of viticulture, religious ecstasy, and theatrical performance. His dual nature, part mortal and part divine, made him a god of contradictions, bringing both joy and madness, creation and destruction. Hermes and His Mischief. Hermes was the son of Zeus and Maia, one of the Pleiades and daughter of Atlas. His birth and first day of life established him as the trickster god, patron of thieves, merchants, and messengers. Maia gave birth to him in a cave on Mount Cyllene in Arcadia, and from the moment of his birth, Hermes displayed extraordinary precocity and cunning. Born at dawn, by noon he had invented the lyre, and by evening he had stolen Apollo's cattle. The story of the lyre's creation shows Hermes' innovative nature. Crawling from his cradle while his mother slept, the infant god found a tortoise near the cave entrance. With divine inspiration, he killed the tortoise, cleaned out its shell, and stretched oxhide over the opening. He attached 7 sheep gut strings, creating the first lyre. After playing with his new invention, Hermes grew hungry and decided to steal some cattle. Apollo's sacred cattle grazed in Pieria, far from the newborn god's cave. Hermes made his way there with supernatural speed and stole 50 of the finest cows. To confuse anyone who might track them, he made the cattle walk backward, and he created special shoes for himself from bark and twigs that left confusing tracks. He drove the cattle to a hidden grove, where he sacrificed 2 of them to the 12 Olympian gods, including himself in the count, thus establishing his place among them before it was officially recognized. When Apollo discovered his cattle were missing, his prophetic powers told him the thief was his newborn brother. He confronted Hermes, who was back in his cradle, playing innocent. The baby god lied with such charm and conviction that even Apollo was almost fooled. Finally, Apollo brought the matter before Zeus, who was amused by his infant son's audacity, but ordered him to return the cattle. Hermes agreed, but then played his newly invented lyre, and Apollo was so enchanted by the music that he traded his cattle for the instrument, establishing Hermes as a god of negotiation and commerce. Zeus was so impressed by Hermes' cleverness that he made him the divine herald, giving him a golden staff called the caduceus, winged sandals for speed, and a winged cap. Hermes became the messenger of the gods, the only deity besides Hades who could freely travel between Olympus, Earth, and the underworld. He also became the god who guided souls to the afterlife, earning him the title Psychopompos, the soul guide. The love stories of the gods. The gods of Olympus were known for their passionate natures, and their love stories, both happy and tragic, shaped much of mythology. Zeus's affairs were countless, each one a story of transformation, pursuit, and often tragic consequences. To seduce Europa, a Phoenician princess, he transformed himself into a beautiful white bull. When Europa climbed on his back, he swam with her to Crete, where she became the mother of Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Sarpedon. To reach Danae, imprisoned in a bronze tower by her father, Zeus became a shower of gold that fell through the roof, and she bore him Perseus, the hero who would slay Medusa. With Leda, the queen of Sparta, Zeus took the form of a swan seeking refuge from an eagle. From this union came 2 eggs, one containing Helen, whose beauty would launch 1,000 ships, and Clytemnestra, who would murder her husband Agamemnon, and the other containing the twins Castor and Pollux, who would become the constellation Gemini. When Zeus pursued Io, a priestess of Hera, he transformed her into a white heifer to hide her from his wife's jealousy, but Hera was not fooled and set the 100-eyed giant Argus to guard her, leading to a long series of adventures. Apollo's love affairs were often marked by tragedy and transformation. His pursuit of Daphne, a nymph who had sworn to remain virgin like Artemis, ended when she begged her father, the river god Peneus, to save her from Apollo's advances. He transformed her into a laurel tree, and Apollo, still in love, made the laurel his sacred plant, wearing a crown of its leaves and declaring that victors in athletic and artistic competitions would be honored with laurel wreaths. His love for Hyacinthus, a beautiful Spartan prince, ended in tragedy when a discus thrown by Apollo was blown off course by the jealous west wind Zephyrus, striking and killing the youth. From Hyacinthus's blood grew the flower that bears his name. Aphrodite, though married to Hephaestus, had numerous affairs, most notably with Ares, the god of war. Their union produced several children, including Eros in some traditions, Phobos and Deimos, Fear and Panic, who accompanied their father into battle, and Harmonia, who brought order from the chaos of her parents' conflicting natures. When Hephaestus discovered the affair, he crafted an invisible net that trapped the lovers in bed, then called all the gods to witness their humiliation, though most of the male gods merely envied Ares' position. One of the most beautiful and tragic love stories involved Orpheus, son of Apollo and the muse Calliope, though some say his father was Oeagrus, a king of Thrace. Orpheus possessed such skill with the lyre that his music could charm wild beasts, make trees dance, and even move stones. He fell in love with Eurydice, a beautiful nymph, and they were married. But on their wedding day, Eurydice was bitten by a snake while fleeing from Aristaeus, who was trying to assault her, and she died instantly. Orpheus's grief was so profound that his mournful songs made all who heard them weep. Even the gods were moved, and they advised him to travel to the underworld to plead for Eurydice's return. His music charmed Cerberus, the 3-headed dog, and moved even the cold hearts of Hades and Persephone. They agreed to let Eurydice return to life on one condition. Orpheus must walk ahead of her and not look back until they both had reached the upper world. Just as they neared the exit, Orpheus, desperate to see if Eurydice was really behind him, turned to look. She immediately vanished, dying a second time, and this time permanently. Orpheus never recovered from this loss, and he was later torn apart by Maenads, the followers of Dionysus, for refusing their advances. The Tale of Persephone. The story of Persephone's abduction fundamentally changed the nature of the world, creating the cycle of seasons that governs mortal life. Persephone was the beloved daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and Zeus. She was extraordinarily beautiful, with a joy for life that seemed to make flowers bloom wherever she walked. Demeter kept her daughter close, raising her in Sicily among the nymphs, far from the other gods who might desire her. One day, while Persephone was picking flowers in a meadow with her companions, she noticed an extraordinary narcissus with 100 blooms. This flower had been placed there by Gaia at Zeus's request, as part of a plan to give Persephone to Hades as his bride. The lord of the underworld had fallen in love with his niece from afar and had petitioned Zeus for permission to marry her. Zeus, knowing Demeter would never agree, but not wanting to refuse his brother, gave his consent secretly and helped arrange the abduction. As Persephone reached for the beautiful flower, the earth suddenly split open, and Hades emerged in his golden chariot pulled by immortal black horses. He seized Persephone and, despite her struggles and cries for help, carried her down into the underworld. The only witnesses were Helios, the sun god who sees all, and Hecate, a goddess of magic who heard Persephone's cries from her cave. The earth closed behind them, leaving no trace of what had occurred except for the scattered flowers and Persephone's grieving companions. When Demeter discovered her daughter was missing, her anguish was boundless. She searched the entire earth for 9 days and nights, carrying blazing torches and neither eating nor drinking nor bathing in her grief. She questioned everyone she met, but no one would tell her what had happened, all fearing to be involved in a conflict between the gods. On the 10th day, Hecate came to her and revealed that she had heard Persephone's cries but had not seen the abductor. Together, they went to Helios, who finally told Demeter the truth about Zeus's involvement and Hades' action. Demeter's grief transformed into rage at Zeus's betrayal. She abandoned Olympus and wandered the earth disguised as an old mortal woman. In her sorrow and anger, she withheld her gifts from the earth. No grain would grow, no fruit would ripen, and no flowers would bloom. The land became barren and cold, and humanity began to starve. This was the first winter the world had ever known, and it threatened to destroy all mortal life. During her wanderings, Demeter came to Eleusis, where King Celeus and Queen Metaneira welcomed her as a nurse for their infant son, Demophon. Demeter grew fond of the child and decided to make him immortal by placing him in the fire each night to burn away his mortality. But Metaneira discovered this one night and screamed in horror, breaking the spell. Demeter revealed her true identity, and though angry at the interruption, taught the Eleusinians her sacred rites, establishing the Eleusinian mysteries that would promise initiates a blessed afterlife. Meanwhile, as famine gripped the earth and mortals died in increasing numbers, they could no longer make sacrifices to the gods. Zeus realized that if all humans perished, the gods would receive no worship and would weaken. He sent god after god to Demeter, offering her magnificent gifts and honors if she would return to Olympus and restore the earth's fertility, but she refused them all. She swore that nothing would grow until she saw her daughter again. Finally, Zeus had no choice but to command Hades to return Persephone. Hermes was sent to the underworld with Zeus's orders, and Hades, though reluctant, had to obey. But before Persephone departed, Hades offered her pomegranate seeds as a farewell gesture. Persephone, who had refused all food in the underworld until then, ate several seeds, either 4, 6, or 7, depending on the telling, either out of politeness, hunger, or because Hades tricked her. When Persephone was reunited with Demeter, their joy was overwhelming, and immediately the earth began to bloom again. But when Demeter learned that Persephone had eaten the pomegranate seeds, she knew her daughter was bound to the underworld. It was an ancient law that anyone who consumed food in the realm of the dead must remain there. Zeus negotiated a compromise where Persephone would spend part of each year with Hades as queen of the underworld, 1 month for each seed she had eaten, and the rest with her mother. During the months when Persephone dwells below, Demeter mourns, and the earth experiences autumn and winter. When Persephone returns, Demeter's joy brings spring and summer. This cycle continues eternally, making Persephone unique among the gods as one who belongs to both the world above and the world below, bridging life and death. In the underworld, she rules alongside Hades with great power, judging the dead and commanding respect from all the chthonic deities. The creation of humanity. The creation of humanity is told in various ways in Greek mythology, each version revealing different aspects of the relationship between mortals and immortals. In one tradition, humans emerged from the earth itself, born from the soil, like plants, which is why they are sometimes called autochthonous, meaning earthborn. Different regions claimed different ancestors who arose this way, establishing their connection to the land. But the most detailed story of human creation involves the Titan Prometheus, whose name means forethought. After the Titanomachy, when Zeus was organizing the cosmos, he gave Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus, whose name means afterthought, the task of creating and equipping all mortal creatures. Epimetheus eagerly began distributing gifts to the animals, giving them fur for warmth, claws for defense, wings for flight, and speed for escape. But he was careless and used up all the gifts before reaching humans, leaving them naked, defenseless, and weak. Prometheus took pity on humanity's pathetic state and decided to help them, even if it meant defying Zeus. First, he taught them all the civilizing arts, including architecture, astronomy, mathematics, navigation, medicine, and metallurgy. But his greatest gift was fire, which Zeus had decreed should remain exclusive to the gods. Prometheus stole fire from Olympus, hiding it in a fennel stalk, and gave it to humanity. This gift transformed human existence, allowing them to cook food, forge tools, warm themselves, and keep predators at bay with light in the darkness. When Zeus discovered this theft, his rage was terrible. He had Prometheus chained to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains, where an eagle would eat his liver every day. Being immortal, Prometheus's liver would regenerate each night, making his torment eternal. This punishment would last for thousands of years until Heracles finally freed him, with Zeus's grudging permission, in exchange for information about a prophecy concerning Zeus's potential overthrow. Pandora and the punishment of humanity. Zeus's anger at Prometheus extended beyond the Titan himself to encompass all of humanity who had benefited from the stolen fire. He devised a punishment that would affect mortals for all time, a gift that would appear beautiful but carry within it all the sorrows of existence. He commanded Hephaestus to mix earth and water and form it into the shape of a beautiful maiden, the first woman, who would be called Pandora, meaning all gifted, because each god would contribute something to her creation. Hephaestus crafted her with extraordinary skill, making her as beautiful as any goddess. Athena breathed life into her and taught her to weave and create beautiful handiwork. Aphrodite gave her irresistible charm and the power to inspire desire. Hermes placed within her a crafty nature, persuasive words, and a talent for deception. The Graces adorned her with jewelry, the Herae crowned her with spring flowers, and Apollo gave her the gift of music and song. Each god contributed something that would make her irresistible to mortals, but also something that would bring complexity and trouble to human existence. Zeus presented Pandora to Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother, as a bride. Prometheus had warned his brother never to accept gifts from Zeus, knowing the god's cunning and desire for revenge. But Epimetheus, true to his nature of thinking only after the fact, was so enchanted by Pandora's beauty and charm that he immediately accepted her, forgetting his brother's warning entirely. Their marriage seemed blessed at first, and Pandora brought joy and wonder to Epimetheus's life. As a wedding gift, Zeus gave Pandora a beautiful jar, sometimes called a box in later tellings, with strict instructions never to open it. The jar was magnificently crafted, covered with intricate designs that seemed to tell stories of their own, and it emanated a faint, mysterious humming that suggested great power contained within. Zeus knew that he had given Pandora not just beauty and skills, but also an insatiable curiosity that would eventually overcome any prohibition. For a time, Pandora resisted the temptation to open the jar. She would walk past it dozens of times each day, her fingers itching to lift the lid just a tiny bit to peek inside. She would lie awake at night, wondering what could be so important or dangerous that it must remain forever sealed. Epimetheus, when asked, could only say that it was a gift from Zeus and must not be opened, which only increased her curiosity. The jar seemed to call to her, and she found herself drawn to it again and again. Finally, when Epimetheus was away, Pandora could resist no longer. She approached the jar slowly, telling herself she would just look at it more closely, perhaps just touch the lid. But once her hands were on it, the temptation became overwhelming. She lifted the lid just a crack, intending to peek inside quickly and close it again. But the moment the seal was broken, all the evils that Zeus had trapped within came rushing out in a terrible whirlwind. Out flew sickness and death, who had never before existed in the world. Following them came pain, sorrow, hatred, and jealousy. Then emerged greed, hunger, poverty, and war. Madness laughed as it escaped, and despair spread its dark wings. All the miseries that plague humanity poured from the jar like a dark cloud of locusts, spreading across the earth to afflict mortals everywhere. Pandora tried desperately to close the lid, but it was too late. The evils had escaped and could never be recaptured. When the terrible storm had passed and Pandora finally managed to close the lid, she heard a small voice from inside the jar. One thing remained trapped within, and that was hope. Some say Pandora released hope as well, to help humanity endure all the evils that had been unleashed. Others say hope remains in the jar still, kept safe for humanity to discover in their darkest moments. This ambiguity about hope's fate reflects its complex nature, for hope can be both a comfort and a torment, both a blessing that sustains us and a delusion that prolongs our suffering. The 5 ages of humanity. The Greeks told of 5 successive ages of humanity, each inferior to the one before, showing a gradual decline from perfection to the current flawed state of mortal existence. This story, preserved most completely by the poet Hesiod, reveals how the gods experimented with different forms of human life before arriving at the current race of mortals. The first was the Golden Age, when Cronus still ruled the cosmos. These humans were created by the gods to be perfect beings who lived like gods themselves, free from toil, suffering, and the ravages of old age. The earth produced food spontaneously without cultivation, and these golden humans spent their days in celebration and joy. They knew neither war nor conflict, living in perfect harmony with each other and with nature. When they died, it was like falling into a peaceful sleep, and they became benevolent spirits who walked the earth invisibly, protecting and blessing later generations of mortals. After Zeus overthrew Cronus, he and the Olympians created the Silver Age of humanity. These humans were inferior to the golden race in both body and mind. They had an extended childhood lasting 100 years, during which they were nursed by their mothers, but their adult life was brief and filled with foolishness. They refused to worship the gods properly and committed violence against each other. Zeus, angered by their impiety and stupidity, destroyed them, but they too became spirits, dwelling beneath the earth as the blessed dead who still receive honors from mortals. Zeus then created the Bronze Age of humanity from ash trees, making them powerful and warlike. These humans were terrible and strong, interested only in warfare and violence. They had armor and weapons of bronze, houses of bronze, and worked only in bronze, for iron had not yet been discovered. Their own violent nature was their downfall, as they destroyed each other in endless wars, leaving no spirit behind when they descended to Hades as shades. Their strength was mighty, but their hearts knew no gentleness, and they brought about their own extinction through constant conflict. The 4th age was the Age of Heroes, also created by Zeus, and these were the demigods, nobler and more righteous than the bronze race. This was the age of the great heroes whose stories would be told forever, including those who fought at Thebes and Troy. Perseus, Theseus, Jason, Achilles, and Odysseus all belonged to this age. When they died, they did not go to gloomy Hades, but to the islands of the blessed at the edge of the world, where they live forever in happiness under the rule of Cronus, whom Zeus had released from Tartarus to govern this paradise. The 5th and current age is the Iron Age, in which humans must toil constantly for their survival. These humans know both good and evil, experiencing joy mixed with sorrow. During the day they labor and suffer, and at night they waste away with worry. Children dishonor their parents, friends betray each other, and hosts violate the sacred laws of hospitality. Justice and righteousness are replaced by might making right, and oaths are broken without thought. This age will continue to degenerate until babies are born with grey hair. Zeus destroys this race as well, and the cycle perhaps begins anew. The Great Flood. As the Iron Age progressed and humanity became increasingly wicked, Zeus decided to visit the earth in disguise to see for himself if the reports of human evil were true. He took the form of a common traveler and sought hospitality at various homes. Everywhere he went, he found confirmation of humanity's corruption, but the worst was when he came to the palace of Lycaon, king of Arcadia. Lycaon had heard rumors that his guest might be a god in disguise, and he decided to test this theory in the most impious way possible. He killed a hostage, some say his own son, and served the human flesh to Zeus as part of the evening meal, reasoning that an immortal would recognize the abominable dish while a mortal would not. Zeus immediately recognized the terrible crime and, in his rage, transformed Lycaon into a wolf, condemning him to live as the beast his actions had shown him to be. This was the origin of lycanthropy, the curse of the werewolf. This final outrage convinced Zeus that humanity was beyond redemption. He called a council of all the gods and announced his intention to destroy the human race with a great flood. Initially, he considered using his thunderbolts to burn the earth, but he feared the conflagration might spread to the heavens themselves. Instead, he decided on water as the means of destruction. He imprisoned the north wind and all the winds that bring clear weather and released the south wind to bring rain. He commanded Poseidon to release all the waters under his control, and the sea god struck the earth with his trident, opening great chasms from which underground rivers poured forth. The rain fell without cessation for 9 days and 9 nights. Rivers burst their banks, seas overflowed their shores, and water covered the plains, then the hills, and finally all but the highest mountain peaks. Forests were submerged, cities vanished beneath the waves, and the boundaries between land and sea disappeared entirely. Dolphins swam through what had been groves of trees, and seals rested on what had been hillsides. The few humans who had initially survived in boats or by climbing to high ground eventually perished from hunger, as all food sources were destroyed. But one righteous couple was spared from this destruction. Deucalion, son of Prometheus, had been warned by his father of the coming flood. Prometheus, though chained to his rock, had foreseen Zeus's plan and instructed his son to build a great chest or ark and stock it with provisions. Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha, who was the daughter of Epimetheus and Pandora, sealed themselves inside the chest when the rains began. For 9 days and nights, they floated on the endless waters, unable to tell direction or distance in the featureless expanse of the flood. On the 10th day, the chest came to rest on Mount Parnassus, one of the few peaks that remained above water. As the waters began to recede, Deucalion and Pyrrha emerged to find a world washed clean but utterly empty of human life. They offered sacrifices to Zeus from what little they had, thanking him for their survival, and the king of the gods was pleased by their piety. He sent Hermes to offer them any gift they desired, and they asked only for the earth to be repopulated. The divine response came through the oracle of Themis, which instructed them to throw the bones of their mother behind them as they walked. At first, this command horrified them, as disturbing the dead was the height of impiety. But Deucalion, inheriting his father's wisdom, realized that their mother was Gaia, the earth, and her bones were the stones that lay scattered on the ground. As they walked down the mountain, they threw stones over their shoulders. The stones Deucalion threw became men, and those Pyrrha threw became women. These new humans were hardy and enduring, as befitted those born from stone, and from them descended all the Greek peoples. The underworld and its rulers. The realm that Hades received when the cosmos was divided was vast and complex, far more than simply a place where dead souls resided. The underworld, also called Hades after its ruler, was a complete world beneath the earth, with its own geography, inhabitants, and laws. To reach it, the dead had to cross several boundaries that separated the world of the living from the world of the dead, and once there, they faced judgment that would determine their eternal fate. The first boundary was the river Styx, the river of hatred, which wound 9 times around the borders of the underworld. This river was so sacred that even the gods feared to break oaths sworn upon it, for any immortal who did so would lie in a coma for a year and be banished from Olympus for 9 more. The ferryman Charon, ancient and grim, poled his boat across these dark waters, but he would only transport those who had been properly buried and who could pay his fee. This is why the Greeks placed a coin, an obol, under the tongue or on the eyes of the dead to ensure they could pay for passage. Those who could not pay or had not received proper funeral rites were condemned to wander the near shore of the Styx for 100 years before Charon would consent to ferry them across. This fate was considered so terrible that ensuring proper burial for the dead was one of the most sacred duties in Greek culture, even for enemies. To leave a body unburied was to condemn that soul to a century of wandering, unable to find rest. Once across the Styx, souls encountered Cerberus, the massive 3-headed dog who guarded the gates of the underworld. Each of his heads was said to see the past, present, and future, making it impossible to deceive him. His body was covered with snakes instead of fur, and his tail was a living serpent. Cerberus welcomed the dead who entered, wagging his tail and allowing them to pass, but he would devour anyone who tried to leave. Only a few heroes ever managed to get past him, either through strength like Heracles, music like Orpheus, or drugged honey cakes like Psyche. Beyond Cerberus lay the fields of Asphodel, where the vast majority of souls spent eternity. This was neither a place of punishment nor reward, but of neutral existence. Here, the dead lived as shadows of their former selves, without joy or sorrow, wandering among the asphodel flowers that grew everywhere in the dim light. They retained their memories but felt them distantly, as if recalling someone else's life. The monotony of this existence was considered its own form of suffering, an eternity of grey twilight without purpose or change. For those who had lived exceptionally virtuous lives, or who were favoured by the gods, there was Elysium, also called the Elysian Fields. This paradise within the underworld was a place of eternal spring, where the blessed dead lived in happiness, feasting, competing in athletics, and enjoying music and poetry. Heroes who had died gloriously in battle, those who had been initiated into certain mystery cults, and the particularly righteous could earn a place here. Some souls in Elysium were given the choice to be reborn, and those who achieved Elysium 3 times gained entrance to the islands of the blessed, an even more perfect paradise. The wicked-faced punishment in Tartarus, the deep abyss that served as both a prison for the Titans and a place of eternal torment for the worst mortal sinners. Here, creative and fitting punishments were devised for each criminal. Tantalus, who had killed his son and served him to the gods, stood in a pool of water beneath fruit trees, but whenever he tried to drink, the water receded, and whenever he reached for fruit, the branches pulled away, leaving him in eternal hunger and thirst. Sisyphus, who had tried to cheat death twice, was forced to push a boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down just before reaching the top, repeating this futile task forever. Ixion, who had attempted to seduce Hera, was bound to a flaming wheel that spun eternally. The Danaïdes, who had murdered their husbands on their wedding night, were forced to carry water in sieves, trying forever to fill a bath that could never hold water. These punishments were not just retribution, but cosmic justice, each one reflecting the nature of the crime in its eternal consequence. 3 judges determined the fate of each soul that entered the underworld. Minos, the former king of Crete, had the final vote in difficult cases. Rhadamanthus, his brother, judged the souls from Asia, while Aeacus judged those from Europe. All 3 had been renowned for their justice in life, and Zeus appointed them to continue this role in death. They sat at the place where 3 roads met, one leading to the fields of Asphodel, one to Elysium, and one to Tartarus. Hades himself rarely left his realm, emerging only for the most important matters, such as when he abducted Persephone or when heroes challenged his authority. He was not evil, as sometimes portrayed in later traditions, but rather stern, implacable, and utterly just. He enforced the natural law that all mortals must die, and none could escape that fate forever. His realm constantly expanded as more souls entered but never left, making him the wealthiest of all gods, as he possessed all the precious metals and gems hidden beneath the earth, as well as an ever-growing population of subjects. The 12 Olympians. The pantheon of Olympus eventually stabilized around 12 major deities, though the exact composition sometimes varied in different traditions. These 12 were considered the most powerful and important gods, those who held the greatest sway over mortal and immortal affairs. They met in council in Zeus's great hall, feasted together on ambrosia and nectar, and their interactions, alliances, and conflicts shaped the fate of the cosmos. Zeus stood supreme among them as king, his throne the highest and most magnificent. His power over thunder and lightning made him the strongest in direct combat, but his true strength lay in his role as the guarantor of order. He upheld the laws of hospitality, punished oath breakers, and maintained the balance of power among the gods. His many affairs and children created a complex web of relationships that bound the divine and mortal worlds together, though they also caused constant strife with his wife Hera. Hera, as queen of the gods, held tremendous power despite the constant humiliation of Zeus's infidelities. She was the goddess of marriage and family, protector of married women, and the sanctity of the marriage bed. Her jealousy and vengeance against Zeus's lovers and illegitimate children were legendary, but she was also a powerful deity in her own right, capable of acting independently and commanding respect from all the other gods. Her sacred animals were the peacock, whose tail eyes represented her all-seeing vigilance, and the cow, representing her maternal aspects. Poseidon ruled the seas with his trident, commanding not just the waters but also earthquakes, giving him the epithet Earth Shaker. His palace lay beneath the waves, built of coral and gems, and he rode across the seas in a chariot pulled by hippocampi, horses with fishtails. His temperament was as changeable as the sea itself, sometimes calm and beneficial, bringing smooth sailing and abundant fish, sometimes violent and destructive, sending storms and tidal waves against those who offended him. His rivalry with Athena for the patronage of cities and his role in the Trojan War demonstrated his importance in mortal affairs. Demeter controlled the fertility of the earth and the cycle of the harvest, making her essential for mortal survival. After the abduction of Persephone, she also became associated with the cycle of life and death, as her grief and joy created the seasons. The Eleusinian mysteries, secret religious rites performed in her honor, promised initiates a better afterlife, making her cult one of the most important in the Greek world. She was often depicted holding sheaves of wheat or a torch, representing both the harvest and her search for her daughter. Athena combined wisdom and warfare, crafts and strategy, making her one of the most complex Olympians. As patron of Athens, she represented civilization itself, the arts and skills that separated humans from beasts. She aided heroes not with brute strength but with clever plans and magical items. Her virginity represented her independence and focus on intellectual rather than physical pursuits. The owl was her symbol, representing wisdom and the ability to see in darkness, both literal and metaphorical. Apollo embodied multiple aspects of civilization and divinity. As the god of music, he led the 9 muses and brought artistic inspiration. As the god of prophecy, he revealed divine will through his oracle at Delphi. As the god of healing, he could both cause and cure disease. As the god of light and truth, he represented intellectual illumination and the rational mind. His silver bow could bring sudden death or healing, and his lyre could soothe the most savage heart. He was also associated with the sun, especially in later traditions, though Helios remained the primary sun deity. Artemis, Apollo's twin, was the eternal virgin huntress who roamed wild places with her band of nymphs. She protected young animals and children, but also brought death to women, just as Apollo brought death to men. Her silver arrows never missed their mark, and she punished harshly those who offended her or threatened her virginity. The hunter Actaeon, who accidentally saw her bathing, was transformed into a stag and torn apart by his own hounds. Yet she also protected women in childbirth and was invoked as a midwife, showing the duality common to Greek deities. Ares represented the brutal, chaotic aspect of warfare, delighting in bloodshed and destruction for their own sake. Unlike Athena's strategic approach to war, Ares embodied the madness of battle, the berserk rage that overtook warriors. He was the least loved of the Olympians, even by his parents Zeus and Hera, who found his bloodthirsty nature distasteful. His companions were his sons Phobos and Deimos, Fear and Panic, and the goddess Enyo, who delighted in the destruction of cities. Yet he was also capable of being wounded and defeated, showing that even divine violence had its limits. Aphrodite, born from the sea foam, wielded power over love and desire that could affect even Zeus himself. Her girdle, a magical belt, could make anyone irresistible, and she used this power freely, causing both joy and chaos. Her affairs were numerous, but her favourites were Ares, representing the connection between love and war, and the mortal Adonis, whose death and rebirth became associated with the cycle of vegetation. She could be both benevolent, bringing happy marriages and fertile unions, and cruel, inflicting devastating passion that destroyed lives and cities. Hephaestus, the divine craftsman, created all the magnificent items used by gods and heroes. Despite his lameness and rough appearance, his skill was unmatched. He built automatons of gold that served as his assistants, created Pandora, forged Zeus's thunderbolts, and made armor that could not be pierced. His workshop beneath volcanoes, particularly Mount Etna, produced both beautiful art and practical tools. His marriage to Aphrodite was unhappy, but he found satisfaction in his work, representing the dignity of labor and skill over mere physical beauty. Hermes served as messenger, psychopomp, and patron of boundaries and travelers. His speed and cleverness made him indispensable to the other gods, carrying out missions that required both diplomacy and cunning. He helped heroes like Perseus and Odysseus, providing magical items and good advice. As god of merchants and thieves, he represented the ambiguous nature of commerce and exchange. His Hermes, stone pillars with his head and phallus, marked boundaries and crossroads throughout Greece, protecting travelers and marking the liminal spaces where one territory became another. The 12th Olympian varied in different traditions. Sometimes it was Hestia, goddess of the hearth, who represented the center of both home and community. Her sacred flame burned in every household and city, and letting it go out was considered a terrible omen. She was the most stable and peaceful of the gods, avoiding the conflicts and dramas that plagued her siblings. In other traditions, Dionysus took the 12th position after Hestia voluntarily gave up her seat to avoid strife. His presence among the Olympians represented the acceptance of ecstasy and irrationality as necessary parts of existence. The heroes before the Trojan War. Between the Age of the Titans and the Trojan War, numerous heroes arose whose deeds became the subjects of countless stories. These demigods and exceptional mortals served as intermediaries between the human and divine worlds, accomplishing tasks that regular mortals could not achieve, but that gods would not lower themselves to perform. Their stories provided moral lessons, entertainment, and explanations for various customs and place names throughout the Greek world. Perseus, son of Zeus and Danae, was one of the earliest great heroes. His grandfather, Acrisius, king of Argos, had received a prophecy that his daughter's son would kill him, so he locked Danae in a bronze tower. When Zeus impregnated her as a shower of gold and she gave birth to Perseus, Acrisius set mother and child adrift in a wooden chest. They washed ashore on the island of Seriphos, where the fisherman Dictys rescued and raised them. When Perseus grew to manhood, the island's king Polydectes, who desired Danae, sent Perseus on what he believed was an impossible quest to bring back the head of Medusa, the only mortal Gorgon whose gaze turned anyone who looked at her to stone. Athena and Hermes aided Perseus, providing him with crucial tools, including a polished shield to use as a mirror, an adamantine sickle to cut through Medusa's neck, winged sandals for flight, a bag to safely contain the head, and Hades' cap of invisibility. Perseus first visited the Graeae, 3 ancient sisters who shared one eye and one tooth between them, and forced them to reveal the location of their sisters, the Gorgons. using the shield's reflection to avoid looking directly at Medusa, he beheaded her while she slept. From her severed neck sprang the winged horse Pegasus and the giant Chrysaor, children of Poseidon conceived before her transformation. On his return journey, Perseus rescued Andromeda, an Ethiopian princess chained to a rock as a sacrifice to a sea monster sent by Poseidon. Her mother Cassiopeia had boasted that she was more beautiful than the Nereids, and this punishment was meant to atone for that hubris. Perseus used Medusa's head to turn the monster to stone and married Andromeda. When he finally returned to Seriphos, he found that Polydectes had been trying to force Danae into marriage. Perseus turned the king and his supporters to stone with Medusa's head, then gave the head to Athena, who placed it on her aegis. The prophecy about Acrisius was fulfilled when Perseus accidentally killed him with a discus during funeral games, showing that fate cannot be avoided. Cadmus, founder of Thebes, began his heroic journey searching for his sister Europa after Zeus abducted her. The Delphic oracle told him to stop searching and instead follow a cow until it lay down from exhaustion, then found a city on that spot. When the cow finally rested in Boeotia, Cadmus prepared to sacrifice it to Athena, but the spring where he sought water was guarded by a dragon sacred to Ares. Cadmus killed the dragon and, on Athena's advice, sowed its teeth in the ground. Armed warriors called Spartoi, meaning sown men, immediately sprouted from the earth and began fighting each other. Only 5 survived, and these became the founding families of Thebes. As punishment for killing Ares' dragon, Cadmus had to serve the war god for 8 years. After this servitude, Athena made him king of Thebes, and Zeus gave him Harmonia, daughter of Ares and Aphrodite, as his wife. Their wedding was attended by all the gods, the last time the Olympians would attend a mortal wedding in person. But the necklace given to Harmonia as a wedding gift was cursed, made by Hephaestus to punish Aphrodite's infidelity, and it brought misfortune to all who possessed it. The curse would plague the Theban royal family for generations, culminating in the tragedies of Oedipus and his children. Bellerophon, a grandson of Sisyphus, became one of the greatest monster slayers of Greek mythology. Falsely accused of trying to seduce the wife of King Proetus of Tiryns, he was sent to King Iobates of Lycia with a sealed letter requesting his death. Instead of killing him directly, which would violate hospitality laws, Iobates sent Bellerophon on impossible quests. First, he had to kill the Chimera, a fire-breathing monster with a lion's head, goat's body, and serpent's tail. Bellerophon tamed Pegasus with a golden bridle provided by Athena and attacked the Chimera from the air, dropping lead into its mouth, which melted from its fiery breath and killed it. Bellerophon succeeded in all of Iobates' challenges, including defeating the Amazons and the Solymi, until the king realized he must be favored by the gods and gave him his daughter in marriage. But success corrupted Bellerophon, and he attempted to fly to Olympus on Pegasus, believing he deserved to live among the gods. Zeus sent a gadfly to sting Pegasus, who bucked and threw Bellerophon back to earth. He survived the fall but was crippled and blinded, spending his remaining days as a beggar, a warning against mortal hubris. Atalanta stood unique among Greek heroes as a female warrior and hunter equal to any man. Abandoned as an infant because her father wanted a son, she was raised by bears and then by hunters. She grew to become the fastest mortal alive and a skilled archer. She participated in the Caledonian boar hunt, where she drew first blood on the monstrous boar sent by Artemis to ravage the land. When Meleager, who killed the boar, awarded her the hide as a prize, it sparked a conflict that led to multiple deaths and Meleager's own doom. Atalanta refused to marry unless her suitor could beat her in a foot race, with losers being executed. Many princes died trying until Hippomenes, advised by Aphrodite, dropped 3 golden apples during the race. Atalanta stopped to pick them up, allowing him to win. However, the couple forgot to thank Aphrodite for her help, and the goddess caused them to desecrate a sacred shrine of Zeus or Cybele in their passion. As punishment, they were transformed into lions, believed by the Greeks to be unable to mate with each other, only with leopards, thus separating the lovers forever. The Voyage of the Argonauts. One of the greatest collective adventures before the Trojan War was the voyage of Jason and the Argonauts to retrieve the Golden Fleece. This quest brought together many of the greatest heroes of the age in a journey that would take them to the edges of the known world and through adventures that tested every skill and virtue they possessed. Jason's story began before his birth, when his uncle Peleus usurped the throne of Iolcus from Jason's father Aeson. Peleus had received a prophecy that he would be killed by a descendant of Aeolus wearing one sandal. When Jason was born, his mother pretended he had died and secretly sent him to be raised by Chiron, the wise centaur who trained many heroes. Chiron taught Jason medicine, warfare, and leadership, preparing him for his destiny. When Jason reached manhood, he returned to claim his throne. On the way, he helped an old woman, actually Hera in disguise, cross a river, losing one sandal in the current. Arriving at Peleus's court with one bare foot, Jason demanded his rightful inheritance. Peleus, recognizing the threat from the prophecy but unable to kill Jason outright without angering the gods and people, agreed to surrender the throne if Jason could retrieve the Golden Fleece from Colchis, a task he believed impossible. The Golden Fleece came from the ram that had rescued Phrixus and Helle, children threatened by their stepmother. Helle had fallen into the sea that bears her name, the Hellespont, but Phrixus reached Colchis, where he sacrificed the ram to Zeus and gave its golden fleece to King Aeetes, who hung it in a grove sacred to Ares, guarded by a never-sleeping dragon. The fleece became a symbol of kingship and divine favour, and many heroes had died trying to claim it. For this quest, Jason commissioned the building of the Argo, the greatest ship yet constructed, with the help of Athena herself. The goddess incorporated into its prow a piece of oak from the sacred grove at Dodona, giving the ship the power of prophecy and speech. Heroes from across Greece answered Jason's call for companions, forming the crew known as the Argonauts. Among them were Heracles, the strongest man alive, though he would leave the quest early searching for his lost lover Hylas, Orpheus, whose music could charm even inanimate objects, the twins Castor and Pollux, one mortal and one immortal, Peleus and Telamon, fathers of the future heroes Achilles and Ajax, Atalanta in some versions, the only woman among the crew, and many others, each bringing unique skills to the voyage. The journey to Colchis was filled with adventures that would become legendary in their own right. On the island of Lemnos, they encountered women who had killed all their men for taking Thracian concubines, and the Argonauts stayed for a year, fathering a new generation. They helped Phineus, a blind prophet, by driving away the harpies that fouled his food, and in return he told them how to pass through the Symplegades, the clashing rocks that destroyed any ship attempting to sail between them. Following his advice, they released a dove and rowed with all their might as the rocks crashed together, losing only the ornament from the ship's stern. They encountered the Amazons, the fierce warrior women who lived without men but avoided conflict through diplomacy. They were aided by the sons of Boreas, the North Wind, who had wings and could fly, proving invaluable in various challenges. On one island, they were attacked by 6 armed giants, while the peaceful Doliones people hosted them, leading to a tragic misunderstanding when they accidentally killed their hosts in a night battle, including the young King Cyzicus, who had just married. When they finally reached Colchis, King Aeetes agreed to give Jason the fleece if he could accomplish seemingly impossible tasks. Yoke fire-breathing bulls with bronze hooves, plough a field with them, sow the field with dragon's teeth, and defeat the armed warriors that would spring from the ground. Aeetes planned to kill the Argonauts regardless, but his daughter Medea, a powerful sorceress and priestess of Hecate, fell in love with Jason through Hera and Aphrodite's machination. Medea provided Jason with a magical ointment that protected him from fire and bronze, allowing him to yoke the bulls. She told him to throw a stone among the warriors that grew from the dragon's teeth, causing them to fight and kill each other. When Aeetes still refused to surrender the fleece, Medea led Jason to the grove where it hung and used her magic to put the guardian dragon to sleep for the first time in its existence, allowing Jason to take the fleece. The Argonauts fled immediately with Medea, pursued by Aeetes and his fleet. The return journey proved equally perilous. In one version, Medea delayed her father's pursuit by killing and dismembering her brother Absyrtus, throwing pieces of his body into the sea so that Aeetes had to stop to collect them for proper burial. This horrific act would haunt their relationship and foreshadow the tragedies to come. They were purified of this murder by Circe, Medea's aunt, and the powerful sorceress who would later encounter Odysseus. The Argonauts faced Scylla and Charybdis, the monster and whirlpool that would later threaten Odysseus, and the Sirens, whose beautiful songs lured sailors to their deaths. Orpheus saved them from the Sirens by playing his lyre more beautifully than they sang, drowning out their deadly music. They encountered Talos, the bronze giant who guarded Crete, running around the island 3 times daily and throwing boulders at approaching ships. Medea destroyed him either through drugs that drove him mad or by removing the nail that kept the ichor, the divine fluid, in his single vein. When they finally returned to Iolcus, they discovered that Peleus had killed Jason's parents and brother. Medea orchestrated a terrible revenge, convincing Peleus's daughters that she could restore their father's youth. She demonstrated by cutting up an old ram and boiling it with herbs, from which a young lamb emerged. The daughters followed her instructions with their father, but Medea withheld the necessary herbs and Peleus died horribly. This murder forced Jason and Medea to flee to Corinth, where their story would end in further tragedy when Jason abandoned Medea for a younger princess, leading to Medea's terrible revenge of killing their children. Theseus and the Labyrinth. Theseus, the great hero of Athens, had a complex origin that established him as both royal and divine. His mother Aethra was visited in one night by both King Aegeus of Athens and the god Poseidon, making Theseus's paternity dual, combining mortal legitimacy with divine power. Aegeus, who had been childless, left before Theseus was born, placing a sword and sandals under a heavy rock and telling Aethra that when their son could lift the rock, he should come to Athens with these tokens of recognition. Raised in Trojan by his mother and grandfather, Theseus grew strong and clever. When he came of age and lifted the rock easily, his mother told him of his heritage. Rather than sail safely to Athens, Theseus chose to travel by land, following the dangerous coastal road where 6 notorious killers preyed on travelers. This choice was deliberate, as Theseus wanted to emulate his cousin Heracles and establish his own heroic reputation. Each of the 6 labors of the road involved defeating a bandit or monster using their own method of murder against them, establishing Theseus as a hero of poetic justice. He killed Periphetes, who bashed travelers with a bronze club and took the club as his own weapon. He defeated Cines, who tied victims between bent pine trees that tore them apart when released. He hunted the Crommyonian sow, a monstrous pig that ravaged the countryside. He threw Siren off the same cliff where the robber had kicked travelers to be eaten by a giant turtle. He out-wrestled Cercyon, who had killed all previous opponents. Finally, he defeated Procrustes, who fitted his victims to his bed by stretching them or cutting off their limbs by giving him the same treatment. Arriving in Athens, Theseus found the city in turmoil. Aegeus had married the sorceress Medea after she fled Corinth, and she recognized Theseus before Aegeus did. Seeing him as a threat to her own son's inheritance, she convinced Aegeus that the stranger was an assassin and prepared a cup of poison for him. Just as Theseus was about to drink, he drew his sword to cut his meat, and Aegeus recognized the weapon. The king struck the poisoned cup from his son's hand and embraced him, banishing Medea from Athens forever. Theseus's greatest adventure involved the Minotaur of Crete. Years earlier, King Minos' son had been killed while visiting Athens, and in revenge, Minos had defeated Athens in war and demanded a terrible tribute. Every 9 years, 7 young men and 7 young women must be sent to Crete to be fed to the Minotaur. This monster, with the head of a bull and the body of a man, was the offspring of Minos' wife Pasiphae and a sacred bull, born from a curse placed by Poseidon when Minos failed to sacrifice the bull as promised. The Minotaur was kept in the Labyrinth, an inescapable maze designed by the master craftsman Daedalus. When the 3rd tribute came due, Theseus volunteered to go as one of the 7 young men, intending to kill the Minotaur and end the tribute forever. His father made him promise to change the ship's black sails to white on his return if he survived. In Crete, Ariadne, daughter of Minos, fell in love with Theseus at first sight. She consulted Daedalus, who told her the secret of the labyrinth, and she gave Theseus a ball of thread, telling him to tie one end at the entrance and unwind it as he went, so he could find his way back. In the depths of the labyrinth, Theseus found the Minotaur and killed it with his bare hands, or in some versions with a sword Ariadne had given him. Following the thread back, he gathered the other Athenians and fled to the ship, taking Ariadne with them. On the island of Naxos, where they stopped to rest, Theseus abandoned Ariadne while she slept. Various reasons are given for this betrayal. Some say Dionysus appeared to him in a dream claiming Ariadne for himself, others that Theseus was simply faithless, and still others that he forgot her in his haste to return home. The tragedy was compounded when Theseus, distracted by grief over abandoning Ariadne or simple forgetfulness, failed to change the ship's sails from black to white. Aegeus, watching from the Acropolis, saw the black sails and believed his son was dead. In despair, he threw himself from the rocks into the sea, which thereafter bore his name, the Aegean. Theseus thus became king of Athens through the bitter irony of his own negligence causing his father's death. As king, Theseus transformed Athens from a collection of scattered communities into a unified city-state, establishing the Panathenaea festival to celebrate this synoecism. He was credited with founding Athenian democracy, voluntarily limiting his own power as king. His later adventures included joining the Caledonian boar hunt, participating in the battle between the Lapiths and Centaurs, and attempting to kidnap Persephone from the underworld with his friend Pirithous, an adventure that ended with both trapped on the chair of forgetfulness until Heracles rescued Theseus. Heracles and his 12 labours. Heracles, whom the Romans called Hercules, was the greatest of all Greek heroes, performing feats of strength and courage that surpassed all others. His very conception was part of Zeus's plan to create a hero powerful enough to help the gods in their future battle against the giants. Zeus disguised himself as Amphitryon, husband of Alcmene, while the real Amphitryon was away at war. The god extended the night to 3 times its normal length to conceive this mighty hero, and Alcmene, the most virtuous of women, never knew she had lain with a god. From birth, Heracles faced Hera's hatred. She sent 2 serpents to kill him in his cradle, but the infant strangled them with his bare hands, laughing as if they were toys. This was the first sign of his divine strength. Amphitryon, realizing the child was special, ensured he received the best education. Heracles learned wrestling from Autolycus, archery from Eurytus, chariot driving from Amphitryon himself, and music from Linus. However, when Linus struck him for playing poorly, Heracles killed him with his own lyre, showing early the dangerous combination of his strength and temper. As a young man, Heracles faced a symbolic choice that would define his life. At a crossroads, 2 women appeared to him: pleasure, offering an easy life of enjoyment, and virtue, offering a difficult life of glory through hardship. Heracles chose virtue, accepting that his path would be arduous, but ultimately rewarding. His first great deed was killing the lion of Mount Cithaeron, which was ravaging the flocks of Thespiae. During the 50 days of this hunt, he slept with all 50 daughters of King Thespius, fathering 50 sons who would later colonize Sardinia. Heracles married Megara, princess of Thebes, and had several children with her. But Hera, in her continuing vengeance, drove him mad, and in his insanity, he killed his wife and children, believing them to be enemies. When he recovered his sanity and realized what he had done, his grief and guilt were overwhelming. He went to the oracle at Delphi to learn how he could atone for this terrible crime. The oracle told him to serve his cousin Eurystheus, king of Tiryns, for 12 years and perform whatever labors were demanded of him. Eurystheus, a weak and cowardly man who had become king only because Hera had delayed Heracles' birth, so that Eurystheus would be born first, delighted in sending Heracles on impossible tasks, hoping each would be his last. These became known as the 12 Labours, though originally there were only 10 until Eurystheus disqualified 2 of them. Each labor was designed to be impossible for any mortal to complete, but Heracles, with his divine strength, clever thinking, and occasional help from the gods, completed them all. The first labor was to kill the Nemean lion, whose golden fur was impervious to all weapons. Heracles strangled it with his bare hands and thereafter wore its pelt as armor, making him nearly invulnerable. The second was to kill the Lenaean Hydra, a serpent with multiple heads that grew back double when cut off. With the help of his nephew Iolaus, who cauterized each neck stump with a torch, Heracles defeated it and dipped his arrows in its poisonous blood, making them lethal to anyone wounded by them. Eurystheus disqualified this labor because Heracles had received help. The third labor required capturing the golden hind of Cerenea, sacred to Artemis, alive. Heracles pursued it for a full year before succeeding, carefully explaining to Artemis that he meant no disrespect to her sacred animal. The fourth was capturing the Erymanthian boar alive. While pursuing it, Heracles accidentally caused the death of the centaur Pholos and wounded Chiron with one of his poisoned arrows, a wound that would eventually lead the immortal centaur to give up his immortality to escape the pain. The fifth labor was cleaning the Augean stables, which housed thousands of cattle and had not been cleaned for 30 years. Heracles diverted 2 rivers to wash through the stables, completing the task in a single day. But Eurystheus disqualified this labor because Heracles had attempted to receive payment from Algaeus. The sixth labor was driving away the Stymphalian birds, man-eating creatures with bronze beaks and metallic feathers they could shoot like arrows. Athena provided bronze castanets made by Hephaestus, whose noise frightened the birds into flight, allowing Heracles to shoot them. The seventh labor took Heracles to Crete to capture the bull that had fathered the Minotaur, which was now rampaging across the island. The eighth required him to steal the man-eating mares of Diomedes, king of Thrace. Heracles fed Diomedes to his own horses, which calmed them enough to be led back to Eurystheus. The ninth labor was obtaining the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. The queen was willing to give it freely, having fallen in love with Heracles, but Hera, disguised as an Amazon, spread rumors that Heracles meant to kidnap Hippolyta, leading to a battle in which Heracles killed the queen and took the girdle. For the 10th labor, Heracles had to travel to the edge of the world to steal the cattle of Geryon, a giant with 3 bodies. On his way, he set up the Pillars of Heracles at the Strait of Gibraltar, marking the boundary of the known world. The 11th labor sent him to steal golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides, which he accomplished either by killing the dragon Ladon that guarded them, or by tricking Atlas into getting them while Heracles held up the sky in his place. The 12th and final labor was the most daunting, bringing Cerberus, the 3-headed dog guardian of the underworld, to the surface. Heracles first had to be initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries to learn how to enter and exit the underworld safely. Hades agreed to let him take Cerberus if he could subdue the beast without weapons. Heracles wrestled Cerberus into submission and carried him to Eurystheus, who was so terrified he hid in a bronze jar and begged Heracles to return the monster to the underworld immediately. The later adventures of Heracles. After completing his labors, Heracles was free from servitude, but not from adventure or tragedy. He participated in many famous expeditions, including Jason's quest for the Golden Fleece. Though he left early when his beloved Hylas was abducted by water nymphs, he fought alongside the gods against the giants in the Gigantomachy, where a prophecy stated the gods could only win with a mortal's help. His arrows killed many giants, and his strength proved crucial to victory. Heracles rescued Prometheus from his eternal torment, shooting the eagle that daily devoured the Titan's liver. In exchange, Prometheus told him how to obtain the golden apples of the Hesperides and warned him about future dangers. He also rescued Alcestis from death, wrestling Thanatos himself to return her to her husband Admetus. He saved Hesione, princess of Troy, from a sea monster, but when her father Laomedon refused to pay the promised reward of immortal horses, Heracles sacked Troy, killed Laomedon, and installed Priam as king, setting the stage for the later Trojan War. His death came through the jealousy of his second wife Deianira and the vengeance of the centaur Nessus. Years earlier, Nessus had tried to assault Deianira while ferrying her across a river. Heracles shot him with a poisoned arrow, and as Nessus died, he told Deianira his blood was a love potion that would ensure Heracles' faithfulness. She believed him and saved the blood. When Heracles later fell in love with Iole, Deianira, desperate to win back his love, sent him a robe soaked in Nessus' blood. The blood was actually a deadly poison, made more potent by being mixed with the Hydra's venom from Heracles' arrow. When Heracles put on the robe, it burned into his flesh with unbearable agony. Unable to remove it without tearing away his own skin and unable to die because of his divine nature, Heracles had a funeral pyre built on Mount Ota. Only Philoctetes, or in some versions his father Poeas, would light it, and in return received Heracles' bow and poisoned arrows, weapons that would prove crucial in the Trojan War. As the flames consumed his mortal part, Heracles' divine nature was freed. Zeus placed him among the stars as a constellation, and he ascended to Olympus, where he was reconciled with Hera and married her daughter Hebe, goddess of youth. He became the gatekeeper of Olympus and the god of strength and heroes, achieving in death the full divinity that his labors in life had earned. His cult spread throughout the Greek world and beyond, making him one of the most widely worshipped heroes in ancient times. The House of Atreus. The curse on the House of Atreus created some of Greek mythology's darkest tragedies, showing how divine vengeance could destroy multiple generations of a family. The curse began with Tantalus, who enjoyed such favor with the gods that they invited him to dine on Olympus. To test their omniscience, he killed his son Pelops, cooked him, and served him to the gods. All recognized the abominable dish except Demeter, distracted by grief over Persephone, who ate a shoulder. The gods restored Pelops to life, replacing his missing shoulder with ivory, and condemned Tantalus to eternal torment in Tartarus. Pelops himself perpetuated the cycle of betrayal and murder. To win the hand of Hippodamia, he had to beat her father Oenomaus in a chariot race. Oenomaus had received a prophecy that his son-in-law would kill him, so he challenged all suitors to race him, with the losers being executed. Pelops bribed Myrtilus, Oenomaus' charioteer, to replace the bronze linchpins in the king's chariot with wax. The chariot crashed, killing Oenomaus, but when Myrtilus tried to claim his reward, which included a night with Hippodamia, Pelops threw him off a cliff. As he died, Myrtilus cursed Pelops and his entire lineage. The curse manifested most horribly in Pelops' sons, Atreus and Thyestes. They murdered their half-brother Chrysippus and fled to Mycenae. When the throne became vacant, an oracle said it should go to a son of Pelops. Atreus and Thyestes agreed that whoever possessed a golden lamb would be king. Atreus had the lamb, but Thyestes seduced Atreus' wife Europa and convinced her to steal it. Thyestes became king until Zeus, favouring Atreus, caused the sun to reverse its course as a sign that Atreus should rule. When Atreus discovered his wife's adultery, his revenge was monstrous. Pretending reconciliation, he invited Thyestes to a feast and served him the cooked flesh of Thyestes' own sons. After Thyestes had eaten, Atreus revealed the truth by showing him the heads and hands of his children. Thyestes fled in horror, cursing Atreus and all his descendants. He later fathered Aegisthus with his own daughter Pelopeia, following an oracle that said this son would avenge him. The curse continued with Atreus' sons, Agamemnon and Menelaus. When Paris abducted Menelaus' wife Helen, Agamemnon led the Greek forces to Troy. At Aulis, where the fleet gathered, Artemis demanded the sacrifice of Agamemnon's daughter Iphigenia before she would provide winds for sailing. Agamemnon lured his daughter there with the promise of marriage to Achilles, then sacrificed her on the altar, though some versions say Artemis rescued her at the last moment, substituting a deer. This sacrifice sealed Agamemnon's doom. While he was at Troy for 10 years, his wife Clytemnestra, Thyestes' daughter and Helen's sister, took Aegisthus as her lover. When Agamemnon returned victorious, bringing the Trojan princess Cassandra as his concubine, Clytemnestra and Aegisthus murdered him in his bath, either with an axe or by entangling him in a net and stabbing him. Cassandra, cursed by Apollo to prophesy truly but never be believed, had foreseen this fate but could not prevent it. The cycle of vengeance continued with Orestes, Agamemnon's son, who had been sent away as a child for his safety. When he came of age, Apollo commanded him to avenge his father by killing his mother and Aegisthus. This divine command placed Orestes in an impossible position, as matricide was one of the greatest sins, punished by the Erinyes, the Furies who pursued those who shed family blood. After killing Clytemnestra and her lover, Orestes was driven mad by the Furies who chased him across Greece. Finally, Athena established a trial on the Areopagus in Athens with Athenian citizens as jurors. Apollo defended Orestes, arguing that the mother was merely a vessel for the father's seed and that killing Clytemnestra to avenge Agamemnon was justified. The Furies prosecuted, insisting that matricide could never be excused. When the jury split evenly, Athena cast the deciding vote for acquittal, establishing the principle that civil law could supersede blood vengeance. The Furies were transformed into the Eumenides, the kindly ones, given an honoured place in Athens as protectors of justice. The Tragedy of Oedipus. The curse on the House of Cadmus reached its terrible climax with Oedipus, demonstrating the inescapable nature of fate in Greek mythology. Laius, king of Thebes and great-great-grandson of Cadmus, received a prophecy that his son would kill him. When his wife Jocasta gave birth to a boy, Laius pierced the infant's ankles and ordered a servant to abandon him on Mount Cithaeron to die. But the servant, taking pity, gave the baby to a shepherd from Corinth, who brought him to the childless King Polybus and Queen Merope, who raised him as their own son, naming him Oedipus, meaning swollen foot, because of his injured ankles. Years later, when a drunk at a feast claimed Oedipus was not Polybus's true son, the disturbed young man went to Delphi to learn the truth. The oracle did not answer his question about his parentage, but instead gave him a horrifying prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother. Believing Polybus and Merope were his parents, Oedipus fled Corinth, vowing never to return. At a crossroads where three roads met, he encountered an older man in a chariot who ordered him out of the way and struck him when he refused to move quickly enough. In his anger, Oedipus killed the man and all but one of his servants, not knowing he had just fulfilled the first part of the prophecy by killing his real father, Laius. Continuing toward Thebes, Oedipus found the city terrorized by the Sphinx, a monster with a woman's head, a lion's body, and eagle's wings. The creature posed a riddle to all who approached the city, devouring those who answered incorrectly. The riddle was, what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening? Oedipus answered correctly that it was man, who crawls as a baby, walks upright as an adult, and uses a cane in old age. The Sphinx, defeated, threw herself from her rocky perch and died. The grateful Thebans made Oedipus their king and gave him their recently widowed queen, Jocasta, as his bride, thus fulfilling the second part of the prophecy. For years, Oedipus ruled wisely and well, fathering 4 children with Jocasta, sons Eteocles and Polynices, and daughters Antigone and Ismene. But then a plague struck Thebes, and the oracle declared it would not end until Laius's murderer was found and punished. Oedipus, determined to save his city, launched an investigation, pronouncing a curse on the killer and anyone who sheltered him. As he pursued the truth with characteristic determination, the terrible reality gradually emerged through the testimony of reluctant witnesses. The blind prophet Tiresias, when forced to speak, declared that Oedipus himself was the pollution. Jocasta, trying to comfort Oedipus, mentioned that Laius had been killed at a crossroads, which disturbed Oedipus. A messenger from Corinth arrived, announcing that Polybus was dead and Oedipus was now king of Corinth as well. When Oedipus expressed relief that he could not now kill his father, the messenger, trying to be helpful, revealed that Polybus was not his real father and that he himself had received baby Oedipus from a Theban shepherd. That shepherd, when found and questioned, was the same servant who had been ordered to expose the infant and the sole survivor of Laius's party at the crossroads. When the full truth was revealed, Jocasta hanged herself in horror. Oedipus, finding her body, took the pins from her dress and gouged out his own eyes, saying he could not bear to look upon his children's siblings or face his parents in the afterlife. He begged Creon, Jocasta's brother, to exile him from Thebes, but Creon, now regent, insisted on consulting the oracle first. Oedipus's daughters, particularly Antigone, remained loyal to their father, while his sons would later fight over the throne, continuing the curse. The story of Oedipus raised profound questions about fate, free will, and moral responsibility. Every action Oedipus took to avoid his fate led him directly to it, suggesting that prophecy in Greek mythology was not merely prediction but immutable destiny. His greatest strengths, his intelligence and determination, became the instruments of his downfall, as his relentless pursuit of truth revealed the horrible reality he would have been better off not knowing. The Seven Against Thebes. The curse on Oedipus's family continued with his sons, who agreed to share the throne of Thebes by ruling in alternate years. Eteocles ruled first, but when his year ended, he refused to step down. Polynices fled to Argos, where King Adrastus welcomed him and gave him his daughter in marriage. Polynices convinced Adrastus to help him reclaim his throne, leading to the famous War of the Seven Against Thebes. 7 champions led the assault, one for each of Thebes' 7 gates. Besides Polynices and Adrastus, these included Tydeus, a fierce warrior who would have gained immortality if he had not been caught eating his enemy's brains in his dying moments, Capaneus, whose boast that not even Zeus could stop him from scaling Thebes' walls resulted in his being struck down by a thunderbolt, Hippomedon, a giant warrior of tremendous strength, Parthenopeus, son of Atalanta, young and beautiful but doomed, and Amphiaraus, a prophet who foresaw his own death but was forced to participate by his wife Euryphile, whom Polynices had bribed with the cursed necklace of Harmonia. The war culminated in single combat between the brothers Eteocles and Polynices at the 7th gate. They killed each other simultaneously, fulfilling Oedipus's curse that they would divide their inheritance with the sword. Creon, now king, decreed that Eteocles would receive proper burial as a defender of Thebes, but Polynices' body would be left unburied as a traitor, condemning his soul to wander without rest. This decree led to the tragedy of Antigone, who defied Creon's order and buried her brother, arguing that divine law requiring proper burial superseded human law. Creon sentenced her to be entombed alive, despite her engagement to his son Haemon. Tiresias prophesied disaster if Creon persisted, but by the time the king relented, it was too late. Antigone had hanged herself in the tomb. Haemon killed himself over her body after attempting to kill his father, and Creon's wife Eurydice committed suicide upon hearing of her son's death, cursing Creon with her last breath. The Epigoni. 10 years after the failed assault of the 7 against Thebes, their sons, called the Epigoni, or Afterborn, mounted a second attack to avenge their fathers. This expedition succeeded where the first had failed, demonstrating the Greek belief that sons must fulfill their father's unfinished business. Alcmaeon, son of Amphiaraus, led the assault after killing his mother Euryphile for sending his father to his death, an act that brought the Furies' pursuit upon him as it had upon Orestes. The Epigoni took Thebes and destroyed it, ending the cursed line of Cadmus's direct rule over the city. This victory came at great cost, as many of the victors were themselves cursed or killed, showing how violence perpetuates violence across generations. The destruction of Thebes removed one of the great powers of mythic Greece, setting the stage for the dominance of other cities and the eventual Trojan War. The Caledonian Boar Hunt. One of the great gatherings of heroes before the Trojan War occurred at the Caledonian Boar Hunt. King Oeneus of Caledon had forgotten to sacrifice to Artemis during the harvest festivals, and the goddess sent a monstrous boar to ravage his lands. The boar was larger than an ox, with bristles like spears and tusks like elephant ivory. It destroyed crops, killed livestock, and made the countryside uninhabitable. Oeneus' son Meleager called together the greatest heroes of Greece to hunt the beast. Among those who answered were Jason, Theseus and Pirithous, Castor and Pollux, Peleus, Telamon, and notably Atalanta, whose participation caused controversy among the male heroes. Many refused to hunt alongside a woman, but Meleager, who had fallen in love with Atalanta at first sight, insisted she be included. The hunt was long and dangerous, with several heroes killed by the boar's charges. Atalanta drew first blood with an arrow to the beast's shoulder, and Meleager delivered the killing blow. He awarded the hide to Atalanta as the prize for first blood, but his uncles, brothers of his mother Althea, objected to a woman receiving the trophy. In the ensuing fight, Meleager killed his uncles, an act that would seal his doom. When Meleager was born, the fates had appeared to Althea and declared that her son would live only as long as a particular log in the fireplace remained unburned. Althea had immediately snatched the log from the fire and hidden it safely, but when she learned that Meleager had killed her brothers over Atalanta, her grief and rage overcame maternal love. She threw the log into the fire, and as it burned, Meleager died in agony. Overcome with remorse, Althea then hanged herself, and Meleager's sisters wept so profusely that Artemis transformed them into guinea fowl. Orpheus and the Mysteries. Beyond his failed attempt to rescue Eurydice, Orpheus played a crucial role in Greek religion as the supposed founder of Orphism, a mystery religion that promised initiates a blessed afterlife. After losing Eurydice forever, Orpheus wandered the earth, singing mournful songs and refusing all romantic advances. He may have established the practice of worshipping Apollo above all other gods, going each dawn to greet the sun. This devotion to Apollo angered Dionysus, or perhaps Orpheus had refused to honor Dionysus properly in his rites. The god sent his Maenads, wild female followers, to punish Orpheus. They found him playing his lyre by a river and, in their divinely inspired frenzy, tore him apart. His head and lyre floated down the river Hebrus and across the sea to Lesbos, where the head continued to sing and give prophecies until Apollo, jealous of the attention it received, finally silenced it. The Muses gathered Orpheus's scattered limbs and buried them, while his lyre was placed among the stars as a constellation. His teachings about purification, the transmigration of souls, and the possibility of escaping the cycle of reincarnation through proper living and ritual observance became the foundation of Orphic mysteries. These mysteries taught that humans had a dual nature, partly divine from the Titans who had eaten Dionysus and partly evil from the Titans themselves, and that through purification the divine nature could be liberated. Daedalus and Icarus. Daedalus was the greatest mortal craftsman, an Athenian who invented the saw, the axe, the level, and numerous other tools. His skill aroused such jealousy in him toward his nephew and apprentice Perdix, who invented the potter's wheel, that he pushed the boy off the Acropolis. Athena transformed Perdix into a partridge as he fell, and Daedalus was exiled for murder. He found refuge in Crete at the court of King Minos, where he constructed many wonders, including the Labyrinth to house the Minotaur. But when he helped Theseus escape the maze, Minos imprisoned Daedalus and his son Icarus in a tower. Unable to escape by land or sea, Daedalus created wings from feathers held together with wax, allowing them to fly like birds. He warned Icarus not to fly too low, where sea spray would wet the wings, or too high, where the sun would melt the wax. In the exhilaration of flight, Icarus ignored his father's warnings and soared toward the sun. The wax melted, the wings disintegrated, and Icarus plummeted into the sea and drowned in what became known as the Icarian Sea. Daedalus buried his son on a nearby island, thereafter called Icaria, and flew on to Sicily, where he found protection at the court of King Cocculus. When Minos pursued him there, Daedalus killed the king by having Cocculus's daughters pour boiling water on him through pipes Daedalus had installed in the palace bath, an invention that had seemed like a luxury but became an instrument of murder. The Amazons. The Amazons were a nation of warrior women who lived at the edge of the known world, usually located near the Black Sea. They were daughters of Ares and the nymph Harmonia. not the same as Cadmus's wife, inheriting their father's warlike nature. In their society, men were enslaved or exiled, used only for breeding, with male children either killed or sent to their father's people. The women removed or bound one breast to better draw their bows, though artistic depictions rarely showed this mutilation. The Amazons appear in numerous myths, usually as opponents of Greek heroes who represented the patriarchal order. Besides Heracles' labour to obtain Hippolyta's girdle and Theseus's abduction of Antiope, which led to the Amazons attacking Athens itself, they fought on Troy's side in the Trojan War. Their queen Penthesilea killed many Greeks before being slain by Achilles, who fell in love with her as she died, showing the Greek fascination with these powerful women who inverted normal gender roles. The defeat of the Amazons in myth served to reinforce Greek ideas about the proper roles of men and women, with the warrior women's inevitable defeat proving the superiority of masculine martial prowess. Yet the respect shown to individual Amazons like Penthesilea and the detail given to their society suggests an anxious fascination with the possibility of female power and autonomy that needed to be both explored and contained within the safe boundaries of myth. The prelude to Troy. The events leading to the Trojan War began long before Paris's judgment or Helen's abduction. The foundations were laid when Zeus realized that the earth was overburdened with people, especially the demigods produced by unions between gods and mortals. He decided that a great war would reduce the population and also bring the Age of Heroes to a close, ending the time when gods freely mingled with mortals. The immediate cause was the wedding of Peleus and Thetis. Thetis was a sea nymph so beautiful that both Zeus and Poseidon desired her, but they learned of a prophecy that her son would be greater than his father. Fearing overthrow, the gods arranged for her to marry Peleus, a mortal hero. Their wedding was the last time all the gods assembled for a mortal celebration, but Eris, goddess of discord, was not invited. In revenge, she threw a golden apple inscribed "To the fairest" among the guests. 3 goddesses claimed the apple: Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Zeus, wise enough not to judge between them himself, appointed Paris, also called Alexander, Prince of Troy, as judge. Each goddess offered him a bribe. Hera promised to make him ruler of all Asia and Europe. Athena offered wisdom and victory in all battles. Aphrodite promised him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta, though she was already married to Menelaus. Paris, young and lustful, chose Aphrodite, earning the eternal enmity of Hera and Athena for himself and Troy. Helen's beauty had caused problems before. When she came of age, suitors from all of Greece sought her hand. Her stepfather Tyndareus, fearing violence from rejected suitors, followed Odysseus's advice. Before choosing a husband for Helen, he made all suitors swear an oath to defend the chosen husband against anyone who wronged him regarding the marriage. This oath of Tyndareus bound all the greatest Greek heroes to defend Menelaus when Paris later abducted Helen, ensuring the war would involve all of Greece. The abduction itself is told differently in various sources. In some versions, Helen fell genuinely in love with Paris through Aphrodite's power and went willingly. In others, she was taken by force while Menelaus was away at a funeral. Still others claim that only a phantom Helen went to Troy while the real Helen spent the war in Egypt, preserving her virtue. Regardless of the truth, the Greeks assembled their forces at Aulis, beginning the decade-long siege that would destroy Troy and kill most of the greatest heroes of the age. Achilles before Troy. Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Trojan War, had a complex origin that made him nearly invulnerable. His mother Thetis, knowing from prophecy that her son would either live a long but obscure life or die young but gloriously, tried to make him immortal. In one version, she held him by the heel and dipped him in the river Styx, making him invulnerable except for the heel by which she held him. In another, she burned away his mortality each night in fire and anointed him with ambrosia each day, until Peleus interrupted the ritual in horror. Thetis, angry at the interruption, left Peleus and returned to the sea, though she continued to watch over Achilles. Peleus sent the boy to be educated by Chiron, the wise centaur, who fed him the entrails of lions and wild boars to increase his courage and taught him warfare, medicine, and music. Under Chiron's tutelage, Achilles became the perfect warrior, swift-footed and deadly in battle. When the Greeks began gathering for the Trojan War, Thetis knew her son would die if he went. She disguised him as a girl and hid him among the daughters of King Lycomedes on the island of Scyros. There, still in disguise, Achilles fathered a son, Neoptolemus, with the princess Deiodamia. But the Greeks had received a prophecy that they could not win without Achilles, and Odysseus was sent to find him. Odysseus, clever as always, came to Scyros disguised as a merchant. He displayed various goods before the princesses, including jewelry, clothes, and weapons. While the girls examined the finery, Achilles instinctively reached for the weapons, revealing his identity. In another version, Odysseus had his men sound a battle trumpet, and Achilles immediately stripped off his disguise and grabbed a spear, ready to fight. Unable to escape his destiny, Achilles joined the Greek expedition, bringing with him his Myrmidons, warriors from his father's kingdom, and his beloved companion Patroclus. The wanderings of Io. Among Zeus's many affairs, his pursuit and transformation of Io demonstrated both the extremes of divine passion and the suffering it caused mortals. Io was a priestess of Hera in Argos, daughter of the river god Inachus. Zeus desired her and appeared to her in dreams, urging her to come to the meadows where he could embrace her. When she told her father about these dreams, he consulted oracles and learned he must exile his daughter or face Zeus's thunderbolts. Zeus pursued Io, but when Hera grew suspicious, he transformed Io into a beautiful white heifer to disguise her. Hera, not deceived, asked for the heifer as a gift, which Zeus could not refuse without arousing further suspicion. Hera set the 100-eyed giant Argus Panoptes to guard Io, ensuring that Zeus could not approach her. Argus was the perfect guard, as only 2 of his eyes slept at any time, leaving 98 always watching. Zeus sent Hermes to free Io. The messenger god, disguised as a shepherd, played his pipes and told stories until all of Argus's eyes closed in sleep, then cut off his head. Hera placed Argus's eyes in the tail of the peacock, her sacred bird, and sent a gadfly to torment Io, driving her to wander the earth in madness. Io crossed from Europe to Asia at the Bosphorus, meaning cows crossing, swam across seas, and wandered through deserts and mountains. In her wanderings, Io encountered Prometheus chained to his rock. The Titan prophesied that she would eventually find peace in Egypt, where Zeus would restore her human form with a gentle touch, and she would bear Epiphus, ancestor of many heroes, including Heracles. Indeed, when Io reached Egypt, Zeus finally freed her from her bovine form and her madness. Hera tried one last time to destroy her rival by having the Curetes kidnap Epiphus, but Zeus struck them down with thunderbolts, and Io lived out her days peacefully in Egypt, worshipped as the goddess Isis. The birth of Pegasus and Chrysaor. When Perseus beheaded Medusa, the only mortal Gorgon, her death released the children she had been carrying from her union with Poseidon. Conceived when she was still a beautiful maiden in Athena's temple, from her severed neck sprang 2 offspring, Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, the warrior with a golden sword. These births from death, beauty from horror, represented the transformative power of divine intervention and the complex relationship between creation and destruction in Greek myth. Pegasus immediately flew to Mount Helicon, where his hoof struck the earth and created the Hippocrene, the horse's spring, whose waters inspired poetic creativity. The Muses claimed this spring, and drinking from it granted artistic inspiration. Pegasus served Zeus, carrying his thunderbolts, until Bellerophon tamed him with Athena's golden bridle. After Bellerophon's fall, Pegasus returned to Olympus and was eventually placed among the stars as a constellation, immortalized for his service to gods and heroes. Chrysaor, less famous than his brother, became the father of the 3-bodied giant Geryon and the serpent woman Echidna, mother of monsters. Through these offspring, the line of Medusa continued to produce creatures that heroes would battle, showing how the consequences of divine actions echoed through generations. The contrast between the beautiful, noble Pegasus and the monstrous descendants of Chrysaor reflected the dual nature inherited from their parents, divine Poseidon and cursed Medusa. The transformations of the gods. The gods frequently transformed themselves and mortals, using metamorphosis as a tool for seduction, punishment, or escape. These transformations revealed the fluid boundary between forms in the divine realm and the gods' ability to transcend fixed physical existence. Zeus's transformations for his affairs were legendary, becoming a swan for Leda, a bull for Europa, a golden shower for Danae, an eagle for Ganymede, and even taking the form of other gods or mortals' husbands to seduce their wives. Mortals transformed by gods usually suffered permanent change as punishment or occasionally salvation. Arachne, who claimed to weave better than Athena, was transformed into a spider condemned to weave forever. Narcissus, who spurned all lovers and fell in love with his own reflection, wasted away until he became the Narcissus flower. Daphne became a laurel tree to escape Apollo. Syrinx became reeds to escape Pan, and these plants became sacred to the gods who pursued them. Sometimes transformation was a mercy. When Baucis and Philemon, an elderly couple, showed hospitality to Zeus and Hermes disguised as travelers while their neighbors refused, the gods saved them from a flood that destroyed their inhospitable community. The couple asked to die together, and the gods transformed them into intertwining trees, an oak and a linden, growing from a single trunk. Alcyone and Ceyx, devoted spouses separated by death at sea, were transformed into kingfishers, reunited as birds who nested during the calm halcyon days of winter. The power of transformation belonged primarily to the gods, but some mortals possessed it through divine heritage or magical knowledge. Proteus, the old man of the sea, could take any form to avoid answering questions, requiring questioners to hold him through multiple transformations. Circe could transform men into animals with her potions, as she did to Odysseus's crew. Medea used transformation in her magic, rejuvenating the old by boiling them with herbs, though she could also use this pretense for murder, as with Peleus. These metamorphoses served multiple narrative purposes. They explained natural phenomena, like why spiders weave or why laurel is sacred to Apollo. They demonstrated divine power and the consequences of hubris or impiety. They also explored the boundaries between human, animal, and divine nature, suggesting that form was less fixed than it appeared, and that the essence of beings could transcend physical shape. In a world where gods walked among mortals and heroes claimed divine parentage, transformation reminded all that reality itself was subject to divine will, and that change, not stability, was the fundamental nature of existence. The Trojan War begins. The greatest conflict in Greek mythology began when the 1,000 ships gathered at Aulis, ready to sail for Troy to reclaim Helen and restore Menelaus's honor. Agamemnon, chosen as supreme commander because he had contributed the most ships and men, faced an immediate crisis. The fleet remained trapped in port by adverse winds, and the prophet Calchas revealed that Artemis was angry because Agamemnon had boasted he was a better hunter than the goddess herself, and he had killed a sacred deer in her grove. The price for favorable winds was terrible beyond imagining. Artemis demanded the sacrifice of Agamemnon's daughter, Iphigenia. Agamemnon initially refused, but the army began to grow restless, and there was talk of choosing a new commander. Finally, he sent a false message to his wife Clytemnestra, claiming he had arranged a marriage between Iphigenia and Achilles, the greatest warrior among the Greeks. When mother and daughter arrived at Aulis expecting a wedding, they found instead an altar prepared for sacrifice. Different versions tell different endings to this horrible moment. In some, Iphigenia went willingly to her death once she understood that the fate of all Greece depended on her sacrifice, and she died heroically on the altar. In others, at the last moment, Artemis substituted a deer for the girl and spirited Iphigenia away to Tauris, where she became a priestess of the goddess. Regardless of which version is true, Clytemnestra believed her daughter dead and began planning the revenge she would take when her husband returned from war. With favourable winds finally granted, the Greek fleet sailed across the Aegean Sea toward Troy. The city itself was magnificently fortified, built by Apollo and Poseidon themselves during their year of servitude to King Laomedon, Priam's father. Its walls were so perfectly constructed that they could not be breached by any mortal means, meaning the Greeks would have to either find another way in or starve the city into submission through a long siege. The Greeks made their landing on the beaches near Troy, but the Trojans, forewarned of their coming, had assembled their forces to oppose the landing. An oracle had declared that the first Greek to set foot on Trojan soil would be the first to die, causing the warriors to hesitate at the ship's prows. Finally, Protesilaus leaped ashore and killed several Trojans before being cut down by Hector, Troy's greatest warrior and Priam's eldest son. His wife Laodamia was so grief-stricken that the gods allowed Protesilaus to return from the dead for 3 hours to say goodbye, after which Laodamia killed herself rather than live without him. The Greeks established their camp on the beach, drawing their ships up onto the shore and building fortifications around them. The Trojans retreated behind their impregnable walls, beginning the pattern that would define most of the war. For 9 years, neither side could gain a decisive advantage. The Greeks could not breach Troy's walls, and the Trojans could not drive the Greeks from their beachhead. During this time, the Greeks raided the surrounding countryside and nearby islands, seeking supplies and wealth while slowly strangling Troy's economy. The Wrath of Achilles. The events that Homer immortalized in the Iliad began in the 10th year of the war, focusing on a period of just a few weeks that would determine the fate of Troy. The conflict started when Agamemnon was forced to return his war prize, Chryseis, daughter of a priest of Apollo, after the god sent a plague upon the Greek camp. To replace her, Agamemnon claimed Briseis, who had been awarded to Achilles as his prize. This public dishonor enraged Achilles, who withdrew from battle along with his Myrmidons, swearing he would not fight again until the Greeks came begging for his help. Without Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior, the Trojans began to gain ground. Hector led assault after assault, pushing the Greeks back to their ships. The Trojans came so close to victory that they made camp on the plain for the first time in the war, their watchfires burning ominously close to the Greek positions. Agamemnon, desperate, sent an embassy to Achilles offering to return Briseis along with vast treasures and even his daughter in marriage. But Achilles' pride and anger were too great. He remained in his tent, playing his lyre and singing of the glorious deeds of past heroes. The situation became so dire that Patroclus, Achilles' beloved companion, begged to be allowed to wear Achilles' armor and lead the Myrmidons into battle. The Trojans, thinking Achilles had returned, initially fled in terror. Patroclus pushed them back from the ships and killed many warriors, including Sarpedon, son of Zeus himself. But he pressed too far, attempting to take Troy itself, despite Achilles' warning to only drive the Trojans from the ships. Apollo struck him, stunning him and knocking off his armor, and Hector delivered the killing blow. When Achilles learned of Patroclus' death, his grief was cosmic in its intensity. His cry of anguish was heard by his mother Thetis in the depths of the sea. She came to him with all her sister Nereids, and they mourned together. Achilles' desire for revenge burned away all other considerations. He knew from prophecy that if he killed Hector, his own death would soon follow, but he no longer cared. Life without Patroclus, and without having avenged him, was meaningless. Thetis commissioned Hephaestus to forge new armor for her son, including a shield that depicted the entire world in miniature, showing cities at peace and war, marriages and trials, harvests and celebrations, representing everything Achilles was fighting to preserve or destroy. When Achilles appeared on the battlefield in his divine armor, his very presence caused the Trojans to flee. He killed so many enemies that the river god Scamander, choked with corpses, rose up against him, trying to drown him in its waters until Hephaestus drove the river back with divine fire. The climactic duel between Achilles and Hector took place before the gates of Troy, with both armies watching. Hector initially fled, running 3 times around the city walls with Achilles in pursuit, until Athena tricked him into standing and fighting by appearing as his brother Deiphobus offering support. The combat was brief and decisive. Achilles, knowing every weakness in the armor Hector had taken from Patroclus' body, drove his spear through Hector's throat. As Hector died, he prophesied Achilles' own death at the hands of Paris and Apollo. Achilles' rage was not satisfied by Hector's death. He tied the body to his chariot and dragged it around Troy's walls and Patroclus' funeral pyre, denying it proper burial. This impiety shocked even the gods, who preserved Hector's body from decay and disfigurement. Finally, Priam himself, guided by Hermes, came secretly to Achilles' tent to beg for his son's body. The sight of the old king kissing the hands that had killed his son moved Achilles to remember his own father, whom he would never see again. The two enemies wept together, mourning their losses, and Achilles returned Hector's body for proper burial, granting a 12-day truce for the funeral rites. The death of Achilles and the fall of Troy. Achilles continued to fight gloriously after Hector's death, killing Memnon, son of Eos and king of the Ethiopians, and Penthesilea, queen of the Amazons, with whom he fell in love at the moment of her death. But his fate was sealed. Paris, guided by Apollo, or with the god actually directing the arrow, shot Achilles in his vulnerable heel as he fought at the Scaean gate of Troy. Some versions say he was ambushed while meeting Priam's daughter Polyxena, with whom he had fallen in love, in the temple of Apollo. The death of Achilles caused a crisis in the Greek camp. Ajax and Odysseus fought off the Trojans and recovered the body, but then disputed who should receive Achilles' divine armor. When the Greeks awarded it to Odysseus, recognizing that his intelligence was now more valuable than Ajax's strength, Ajax went mad with humiliation. In his madness, he slaughtered a flock of sheep, believing them to be Greek leaders. When he recovered his senses and realized what he had done, he fell on his sword rather than live with the shame. With their greatest heroes dead, the Greeks seemed no closer to victory. But they captured Helenus, a Trojan prince and prophet, who revealed under duress the conditions necessary for Troy's fall. The Greeks needed Heracles' bow and arrows, which were with Philoctetes, whom they had abandoned on the island of Lemnos years before because of a festering snake bite. They needed to bring Achilles' son Neoptolemus from Syros. They needed to steal the Palladium, an ancient statue of Athena that protected Troy, and the city would only fall through cunning, not force. Odysseus and Neoptolemus retrieved Philoctetes, whose wound was healed by the Greek physicians. Philoctetes used Heracles' poisoned arrows to kill Paris, though not before Paris had time to crawl back to his first wife, Oenone, a nymph who could have healed him but refused because of his betrayal. Odysseus and Diomedes infiltrated Troy at night and stole the Palladium, though some say it was only a copy and the real one remained hidden. With these conditions met, only the method of Troy's fall remained to be determined. The Trojan Horse. The stratagem of the Trojan horse was conceived by Odysseus, though Athena guided its construction. Epeius, the Greek craftsman, built an enormous wooden horse, large enough to hold a contingent of warriors in its hollow belly. The Greeks inscribed upon it a dedication to Athena for their safe return home, then burned their camp, boarded their ships, and sailed away, hiding behind the nearby island of Tenedos. They left behind only Sinon, who allowed himself to be captured and told the Trojans an elaborate lie. Sinon claimed he had escaped being sacrificed by the Greeks, who needed a human sacrifice for favourable winds to sail home, just as they had sacrificed Iphigenia to come to Troy. He said the horse was an offering to Athena to atone for stealing the Palladium, and that it was made so large to prevent the Trojans from bringing it into their city, for if they did, Troy would become unconquerable and would one day conquer Greece itself. This reverse psychology worked perfectly on the Trojans, who were determined to bring the horse inside. Laocoon, a priest of Poseidon, warned against accepting the Greek gift, speaking the famous words that would echo through history, "I fear Greeks even bearing gifts." To demonstrate his point, he hurled a spear at the horse, which resonated with a hollow sound. But at that moment, two enormous serpents emerged from the sea and devoured Laocoon and his two sons. The Trojans interpreted this as punishment for sacrilege against Athena's offering, though in truth, it was either Athena or Poseidon ensuring that Troy would fall. Cassandra, Priam's daughter who was cursed to prophesy the truth but never be believed, also warned that the horse contained armed warriors and would bring Troy's destruction, but the Trojans, intoxicated by the belief that they had won the war, ignored her warnings as they always did. They broke through their own walls to bring the horse into the city, for it was too large for the gates, thus fulfilling another prophecy that Troy's walls would only be breached from within. That night, the Trojans celebrated their apparent victory with feasting and wine. When the city finally slept, exhausted and drunk, Sinon released the Greek warriors from the horse. They opened the gates for the Greek army, which had silently returned under cover of darkness. The sack of Troy was brutal and complete. The Greeks, after 10 years of frustration and loss, showed no mercy. Priam was killed at the altar of Zeus by Neoptolemus, violating the sanctuary of the gods. Cassandra was dragged from Athena's temple by Ajax the Lesser and later given to Agamemnon as a concubine. The male children of Troy were killed to prevent future revenge, including Hector's infant son Astyanax, thrown from the walls. The women were enslaved and distributed among the Greek leaders. Hecuba, Priam's queen, went to Odysseus, Andromache, Hector's widow, to Neoptolemus, and others to various Greek warriors. Helen was reunited with Menelaus, who had intended to kill her but was once again overcome by her beauty, which some say was enhanced by Aphrodite to save her. Of all the Trojan royal family, only Aeneas escaped with his life intact, carrying his elderly father Anchises on his back and leading his young son Ascanius by the hand, protected by his mother Aphrodite. He would wander for years before establishing a new Troy in Italy, becoming the ancestor of the Romans who would one day surpass the Greeks themselves. This escape ensured that the Trojan legacy would continue, transformed but not destroyed. The returns of the heroes. The Greeks' victory at Troy did not guarantee safe returns home. The gods, offended by various impieties during the sack of Troy, ensured that many heroes would suffer or die before reaching their destinations. The returns, called the nostoi in Greek, became epic tales in themselves, showing that the end of war did not mean the end of suffering. Agamemnon's return was the swiftest and most tragic. He sailed home with Cassandra and his share of the Trojan treasure, arriving at Mycenae to what seemed like a hero's welcome. His wife Clytemnestra had prepared a great feast and a warm bath for her travel-weary husband, but as Agamemnon bathed, Clytemnestra and her lover Aegisthus entangled him in a net or robe and murdered him with an axe. Cassandra, who had foreseen this fate but could do nothing to prevent it, was killed moments later, her prophecies dying with her. Menelaus, though he regained Helen, was blown off course to Egypt, where he remained for 8 years. There he wrestled with Proteus, the shape-changing old man of the sea, to learn how to appease the gods and return home. He had to return to Egypt to make proper sacrifices he had neglected in his eagerness to leave Troy. Eventually, he and Helen reached Sparta, where they apparently lived in reconciliation, their marriage somehow surviving the war it had caused. Diomedes returned to Argos to find his wife had taken a lover, influenced by Aphrodite, who still held a grudge from when Diomedes had wounded her at Troy. Driven from his kingdom, he sailed to Italy, where he founded several cities and was eventually deified. Ajax the Lesser was shipwrecked by Athena as punishment for violating Cassandra in her temple. He clung to a rock and boasted that he had survived despite the gods, whereupon Poseidon split the rock with his trident, drowning the blasphemer. Philoctetes, despite his crucial role in Troy's fall, found his kingdom usurped and had to flee to Italy, where he founded cities and dedicated a shrine to Apollo with Heracles' bow and arrows. Idomeneus of Crete, caught in a storm, vowed to sacrifice the first thing he saw on landing safely. This turned out to be his son, and after fulfilling or attempting to fulfill this terrible vow, he was driven from Crete by his horrified subjects. Neoptolemus took a land route home through Thrace, where he met Odysseus' son Telemachus years later. He enslaved Andromache, but treated her well, and she bore him children. He was eventually killed at Delphi, either in a dispute over sacrificial meat or by Orestes, who wanted to marry Hermione, Helen's daughter, who had been promised to both men. The Odyssey of Odysseus. The longest and most famous return was that of Odysseus, whose 10-year journey home became an epic that paralleled the 10 years of war. His wanderings took him to the edges of the world and beyond, through adventures that tested not his martial prowess, but his intelligence, endurance, and will to survive and return home to Ithaca, his wife Penelope, and his son Telemachus. After leaving Troy, Odysseus's 12 ships were first driven to the land of the Cicones, where his men, against his orders, lingered to raid and feast. The Cicones rallied and counterattacked, killing many Greeks and setting the pattern of Odysseus's men bringing disaster through their own folly. A storm then drove them to the land of the Lotus Eaters, where those who ate the lotus fruit forgot all desire to return home. Odysseus had to drag his affected crew members back to the ships by force. Next came the encounter with Polyphemus, the Cyclops son of Poseidon. Trapped in the giant's cave with his men being eaten 2 at a time, Odysseus cleverly gave his name as Nobody, then blinded the Cyclops with a heated stake while he slept drunk. When Polyphemus called for help, saying nobody was hurting him, the other Cyclops assumed nothing was wrong. But as Odysseus sailed away, his pride overcame his prudence, and he revealed his real name, allowing Polyphemus to curse him and pray to Poseidon that Odysseus would reach home only after long suffering, with all his companions dead, and would find trouble in his house. Aeolus, master of the winds, gave Odysseus a bag containing all the winds except the favourable west wind, which would blow them home. They came within sight of Ithaca, but while Odysseus slept, his men opened the bag, thinking it contained treasure. The released winds drove them back to Aeolus, who refused to help again, seeing they were cursed by the gods. The Laestrygonians, giant cannibals, destroyed 11 of Odysseus's 12 ships, eating their crews. Only Odysseus's own ship escaped to the island of Aiaia. On Aiaia lived Circe, the sorceress who transformed Odysseus's scouts into swine with drugged wine. Hermes gave Odysseus the herb moly to protect him from her magic, and when her spells failed, she became his ally and lover. For a year, Odysseus and his men remained with Circe in comfort until the crew reminded their captain of home. Circe told them they must first visit the underworld to consult the prophet Tiresias about their journey home. The journey to the underworld revealed to Odysseus the fate of many who had died at Troy and elsewhere. He spoke with his mother, who had died of grief during his absence, with Agamemnon, who warned him about faithless wives, with Achilles, who said he would rather be a living slave than king of all the dead, and with Ajax, who still refused to speak to him over the armour dispute. Tiresias told him about the cattle of Helios and warned that eating them would destroy his ship and crew. Returning to Circe, Odysseus received instructions for passing the sirens, whose irresistible songs lured sailors to their deaths. He plugged his crew's ears with wax but had himself tied to the mast so he could hear their songs safely. They sang of knowledge and glory, promising to tell him everything that had happened at Troy and everything that would happen in the future. But he resisted their call. Next came the choice between Scylla and Charybdis. Scylla was a 6-headed monster who would snatch 6 men, while Charybdis was a whirlpool that would destroy the entire ship. Following Circe's advice, Odysseus steered closer to Scylla, sacrificing 6 men to save the rest. The cries of his men as Scylla devoured them haunted Odysseus as the worst moment of his journey. On the island of Thrinacia, Odysseus's men, driven by hunger during a month of contrary winds, slaughtered the sacred cattle of Helios while Odysseus slept. When they sailed, Zeus struck their ship with a thunderbolt, killing all except Odysseus, who clung to wreckage and drifted for 9 days before washing ashore on Ogygia, the island of the nymph Calypso. Calypso loved Odysseus and kept him on her island for 7 years, offering him immortality if he would stay as her husband. But Odysseus wept daily on the shore, longing for home and his mortal wife. Finally, Athena persuaded Zeus to order Odysseus's release. Hermes commanded Calypso to let him go, and she helped him build a raft, though she warned him his suffering was not over. Poseidon wrecked the raft with a storm, but Odysseus swam for 2 days and nights, aided by the sea goddess Leucothea's veil, before reaching the land of the Phaeacians. Princess Nausicaa found him and brought him to her parents, King Alcinous and Queen Arete, who listened to his story and provided a ship to take him home, despite knowing Poseidon would punish them for helping his enemy. The return to Ithaca. While Odysseus wandered, Ithaca had fallen into chaos. Believing Odysseus dead, over 100 suitors had invaded his palace, courting Penelope and consuming his wealth in endless feasting. Penelope had delayed choosing a new husband through various stratagems, most famously by weaving a funeral shroud for Odysseus's father Laertes by day and secretly unraveling it by night, saying she would choose when it was complete. This worked for 3 years until her servants betrayed the trick. Telemachus, Odysseus's son, had grown to manhood without his father and lacked the strength to expel the suitors. Inspired by Athena, he had travelled to Pylos and Sparta, seeking news of Odysseus, learning from Menelaus that Odysseus was alive but imprisoned on Calypso's island. The suitors, meanwhile, plotted to ambush and kill Telemachus on his return, planning to divide Odysseus's wealth among themselves. When the Phaeacians delivered Odysseus to Ithaca, he was asleep, and they left him on the shore with treasure. Poseidon turned their ship to stone as it entered their harbour, fulfilling an old prophecy and ensuring they would never help travellers again. Athena disguised Odysseus as an old beggar and advised him to assess the situation before revealing himself. Odysseus first went to his loyal swineherd Eumaeus, who offered hospitality despite not recognising his master. There he met Telemachus, who had avoided the suitors' ambush. Father and son were reunited, and Odysseus revealed his identity, though Telemachus could hardly believe his father had returned. Together, they planned the destruction of the suitors, with Odysseus entering the palace as a beggar to test the loyalty of his servants and the character of the suitors. In the palace, the suitors abused the disguised Odysseus, with Antinous, their ringleader, even throwing a stool at him. Penelope, hearing of the stranger who claimed to have news of Odysseus, interviewed him. Odysseus, maintaining his disguise even with his wife, told her Odysseus would return soon. His old nurse Eurycleia recognized him by a scar while washing his feet, but he swore her to silence. Penelope, perhaps suspecting the truth or driven by divine inspiration, announced she would marry whoever could string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe handles aligned in a row. The suitors all failed even to string the bow. Odysseus, still disguised, asked to try and easily accomplished the feat. Then, throwing off his disguise, he turned the bow on the suitors. With Telemachus, Eumaeus, and the cowherd Philoetius, Odysseus slaughtered all the suitors in a battle within the halls. The suitors, caught without their weapons which Telemachus had removed, were massacred. Antinous died first, an arrow through his throat while drinking wine. The others begged for mercy, blaming Antinous for everything, but Odysseus showed no compassion. Only Phemius the bard and Medon the herald were spared, as they had served the suitors under compulsion. The disloyal servants were hanged, and the hall was purified with sulphur. Still, Penelope remained cautious, testing Odysseus with secret knowledge only they shared about their marriage bed, which Odysseus had carved from a living olive tree. Only when he proved this knowledge did she accept that her husband had truly returned, and they were reunited after 20 years of separation. The end of the Age of Heroes. The generation after the Trojan War marked the end of the Age of Heroes, the transition from the mythic age when gods walked among mortals to the historical age when divine intervention became rare and indirect. The children of the heroes who fought at Troy faced their own challenges, but these were more human in scale, more concerned with politics and revenge than with monsters and divine quests. Orestes' matricide to avenge Agamemnon has already been told, establishing the principle that human law could supersede the ancient law of blood vengeance. His story marked a shift from the primitive justice of endless revenge cycles to the civilized justice of law courts and rational judgment. The transformation of the Furies into the Eumenides represented this evolution from chaos to order. Telemachus, after Odysseus' return, grew into a worthy successor, though stories of his later life vary. Some say he married Circe after Odysseus' death, while others have him marrying Nausicaa. These marriages represent the binding together of the various threads left loose by the Odyssey, creating a sense of closure to the epic cycle. The sons of the seven against Thebes, the Epigoni, successfully conquered Thebes where their fathers had failed, but their victory felt hollow. The age of great heroes conquering great cities was ending, replaced by smaller conflicts over smaller stakes. The magical elements that had defined the earlier age, the invulnerable warriors, the divine interventions, the monsters and transformations, became increasingly rare. According to Hesiod, this decline was intentional, part of Zeus's plan to separate the divine and mortal worlds more clearly. The gods withdrew to Olympus, intervening less directly in human affairs. Oracles and omens replaced face-to-face conversations with deities. The great prophets and seers died out, taking with them the direct knowledge of divine will. The legacy and meaning. As the Age of Heroes ended and the Age of Iron progressed, the myths of Greece were preserved and transmitted not as mere entertainment, but as fundamental truths about the nature of existence. These stories explained why the world was as it was, from the changing seasons to the positions of the stars, from the customs of hospitality to the rituals of burial. Every aspect of Greek life was touched by these myths, which provided a framework for understanding both the cosmos and human nature. The myths taught that hubris, excessive pride that challenges the gods, inevitably leads to nemesis, divine retribution. Mortals who forgot their place, who claimed to be equal or superior to gods, faced destruction. Yet the myths also celebrated human achievement, the cleverness of Odysseus, the strength of Heracles, the courage of Achilles. The tension between human limitation and human aspiration defined the Greek understanding of heroism. The stories revealed the Greeks' complex view of the gods as powerful but not omnipotent, immortal but not unchanging, worthy of worship but not always of emulation. The gods exhibited human emotions and failings magnified to cosmic scale. Their jealousies, desires, and conflicts drove the narrative of myth, but they also maintained cosmic order, punished wrongdoing, and occasionally rewarded virtue. The importance of fate permeated these stories. Even the gods were subject to fate, unable to save their favorite mortals from destined deaths. The three fates, spinning, measuring, and cutting the threads of life, stood as perhaps the only truly inviolable power in the cosmos. Yet within the bounds of fate, free will operated. Heroes made choices that defined their character, even when those choices led inexorably to predetermined ends. The myths also explored the boundaries between civilization and barbarism, order and chaos. Heroes like Theseus and Heracles made the world safe for civilization by defeating monsters and establishing laws. The contrast between Greek and non-Greek, between the ordered life of the polis and the wild spaces beyond, reflected Greek cultural values and anxieties about their place in the wider world. Family relationships drove many of the most powerful myths, from the generational conflicts of the Titans and Olympians to the cursed houses of mortal dynasties. The bonds between parents and children, between siblings, between spouses, created both the greatest loyalties and the most terrible betrayals. The frequency of infanticide, patricide, matricide, and fratricide in these stories revealed deep anxieties about family dynamics and the transmission of guilt across generations. The treatment of women in these myths reflected and reinforced Greek social structures while also revealing their contradictions. Powerful goddesses like Athena and Artemis embodied ideals of female strength and independence, but they remained virgins, suggesting that female power and sexuality were incompatible. Mortal women in myths often suffered for the desires they inspired in gods and men, yet figures like Penelope and Antigone showed women as moral agents capable of heroic virtue within constrained circumstances. The afterlife presented in these myths offered both comfort and warning. Most souls faced neither reward nor punishment, but a shadowy existence that emphasized the value of life and glory. The mystery religions, particularly those of Demeter and Dionysus, offered initiates hope for a better afterlife. introducing ideas of personal salvation that would influence later religions. The eternal cycle. Greek mythology presents time not as linear progress but as cyclical decline and renewal. The succession of ages from gold to silver to bronze to heroes to iron suggested degeneration, yet there were hints of eventual renewal. Some sources spoke of the ages repeating, with a new golden age following the destruction of the Iron Age. This cyclical view influenced Greek historical thinking and their understanding of political change. The seasonal cycle of Persephone's descent and return, causing winter and spring, provided a powerful metaphor for death and rebirth that resonated through Greek culture. The mystery religions elaborated on this theme, using agricultural cycles as symbols for spiritual transformation. The death and return of vegetation became linked to the death and potential rebirth of the soul. The myths preserved memory of earlier times, possibly reflecting cultural memories of the Bronze Age collapse and the Greek Dark Ages. The stories of great palaces, lost civilizations, and declined powers may encode historical truths about Mycenaean civilization and its fall. Troy itself, long thought purely mythical, was revealed by archaeology to have been a real city destroyed in the appropriate period. Yet these myths were not static relics but living traditions that evolved with Greek culture. Different cities emphasized different myths that supported their claims to glory or territory. Athenian prominence in many surviving myths reflects Athens' cultural dominance in the classical period when many myths were being written down in their surviving forms. The influence of these myths extended far beyond ancient Greece. Roman mythology adapted and continued Greek myths, with Roman poets like Virgil and Ovid preserving and transforming Greek stories for new audiences. The rediscovery of Greek mythology in the Renaissance inspired countless works of art, literature, and music. Modern psychology adopted mythological figures like Oedipus, Narcissus, and Psyche as symbols for understanding human behavior. The twilight of the gods. Some traditions spoke of an eventual end to the Olympian Order, though these prophecies were vague and contradictory. The giants' assault on Olympus had been defeated with Heracles' help, but other threats remained potential. Typhon, imprisoned beneath Mount Etna, still breathed fire through the volcano. The Titans in Tartarus awaited any weakness in their guards. The possibility that Zeus himself might be overthrown, as he had overthrown Cronus, lurked in various prophecies. The myth of the flood that destroyed the Iron Age of humanity, except for Deucalion and Pyrrha, suggested that Zeus might again destroy humanity if it became irredeemably corrupt. Some sources hinted at future conflicts between gods and mortals, or among the gods themselves, that would transform or end the current cosmic order. These apocalyptic hints remained undeveloped in Greek mythology, unlike the detailed end times narratives of some other mythologies. Instead, Greek mythology suggested a gradual withdrawal of the divine from direct involvement in the mortal world. The gods became more distant, their interventions rarer and more ambiguous. The great oracles would eventually fall silent, the sacred groves would be cut down, and new gods would be worshipped in the old temples. This twilight of the gods was not a violent apocalypse, but a slow fading, a transformation rather than a destruction. The philosophers of Greece began to interpret the myths allegorically, seeing in them not literal truths but symbolic representations of natural forces or moral principles. Zeus became the organizing principle of the cosmos, Apollo the rational mind, Dionysus the irrational impulse. This philosophical interpretation preserved the myths while transforming their meaning, allowing them to survive in cultures that no longer worshipped the Olympian gods. The eternal return. As this long journey through Greek mythology draws to its close, we return to where we began, with chaos, the primordial void from which all things emerged. The stories of Greek mythology form their own cosmos, a self-contained universe of meaning that continues to influence how we understand ourselves and our world. These ancient tales of gods and heroes, monsters and transformations, love and war, creation and destruction remain relevant not because we believe them literally, but because they speak to fundamental human experiences and concerns. The hero's journey from obscurity through trials to glory or tragedy provides a template for understanding our own life stories. The gods' passions and conflicts reflect our own emotional lives magnified to cosmic proportions. The myths' explanations for natural phenomena remind us of humanity's eternal quest to understand and find meaning in the world around us. The curses that pass through generations speak to the real ways that trauma and violence perpetuate themselves through families and cultures. In the darkness of night, when sleep approaches and consciousness begins to fade, we return to our own primordial chaos, the unconscious from which dreams emerge. The myths that have accompanied humanity through thousands of years of nights continue to structure our dreams and shape our understanding. The labyrinth that Theseus navigated, the transformations that gods and mortals underwent, the journeys to the underworld and back, all resonate with the journey each of us takes nightly into sleep and dreams. The cosmogony of Greek mythology, the emergence of order from chaos, repeats each morning as consciousness emerges from sleep. The daily journey of Helios across the sky, bringing light and life, parallels our own daily awakening. The eternal cycles of Greek mythology, the repetitions and variations, the familiar patterns in different forms, mirror the rhythms of our own existence, the way each day is both unique and part of an eternal pattern. And so the myths continue, not as artifacts of a dead religion, but as living stories that continue to evolve and influence. Each retelling adds new meanings while preserving ancient wisdom. The gods may no longer receive sacrifices on marble altars, but they live on in language, in art, in psychology, in the very ways we structure and understand narrative. Zeus's thunder becomes a metaphor for sudden inspiration or anger, Achilles' heel a term for fatal weakness, Pandora's box a warning about unintended consequences. The hero's quests continue in every story of adventure and self-discovery. The Trojan War echoes in every conflict where pride and honor override prudence. Odysseus' journey home resonates with everyone who has struggled to return to where they belong. Orpheus' loss of Eurydice speaks to everyone who has lost love through their own fault. These patterns, established in Greek mythology, have become the fundamental templates of Western storytelling. As sleep finally approaches, as consciousness yields to the mysterious realm of dreams, we leave behind the ordered world of waking life and enter our own mythological landscape. In dreams, we may find ourselves in labyrinths or on wine-dark seas, pursued by monsters or aided by mysterious guides. The boundaries between self and other, between human and animal, between possible and impossible, become fluid as they were in the age of myth. The Greek myths remind us that there was a time when the world was full of gods and monsters, heroes and transformations, a time when every grove might hide a nymph, every stranger might be a god in disguise, every quest might lead to glory or doom. That mythic world may seem far removed from our rational scientific age, yet it persists in our dreams, our stories, our deepest fears and highest aspirations. And perhaps, in the end, that is the greatest gift of Greek mythology, not the specific stories of specific gods and heroes, but the mythic way of seeing that recognizes the divine in the natural, the eternal in the temporal, the universal in the particular. It reminds us that beneath the surface of ordinary life flow deeper currents of meaning, that our individual stories participate in larger patterns, that we are connected to each other and to the cosmos in ways that rational thought alone cannot fully comprehend. As this narrative of Greek mythology concludes and silence returns, may these ancient stories continue to resonate in the depths of sleep, weaving themselves into dreams, connecting us to the long chain of humanity that has found meaning, wisdom, and beauty in these tales of gods and mortals, order and chaos, love and strife, mortality and transcendence. May they remind us that we too are part of an ongoing story, participants in the eternal drama that began with chaos and continues still, world without end, in the ever-turning cycles of myth and dream, sleeping and waking, forgetting and remembering, as night follows day and day follows night in the eternal dance first set in motion when chaos gave birth to night and day, earth and sky, and all the wonders that followed in their wake.